This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate first part of what if Naruto was the strongest devil in hell. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto POV Hell is the place where everyone's nightmares come true. The world where demons are free to roam around and do whatever they want. The only thing that prevents the innumerable lesser demons from misbehaving is the presence of Yami, the god of hell himself, who rules with his army of legions of demons of all kinds. All sinners who are found guilty by Kami's court are sent to hell. Every sinner, rapists, killers, child abusers, is taken there by the hands of hell, where they are tormented for all eternity while chained to hell with no chance of escape, regardless of how much they protest that they are innocent. And I live there, too. Heaven, hell's most despised realm, is home to the high and powerful deities of all the gods except Yami, who would only appear when the summons of all the gods was declared. The old gods rule over this realm, and Kami herself rules over them all. The beings in heaven believe they can get away with a lot because they're the holy ones, even though she is the ruler. Among the pantheon deities of heaven, such conceit and widespread foolishness are quite pitiful. Then there is the human world, or Ningenkai, the third realm, or the third kingdom, as some demons refer to it. In that place, Kami's creations thrive and are protected by heaven's watchful gaze. Alternatively, in certain instances, a sinner is taken to hell, where they endure eternal torture for their transgressions. Humans are the most despised creatures in hell, despite heaven's protection. They deserve nothing more than an eternity of suffering and torment, where they are beaten and devoured by the demons only to have their odis regenerate and endure the excruciating agony once more. The demons, and even I view them, as nothing more than haughty, vile wastes of life. Their groans and echoes of agony can reverberate throughout hell as the flames of hell burn away their flesh and reduce even their skeletons to ash. However, hell's history is both highly instructive and mildly humorous. Yami, the god of hell, rules hell with an army that is unquestionably appropriate for hell. One of the devils in Yami's army is Lucifer, a very uncommon breed of devil that only exists in small numbers. They became more powerful with every battle, and even they were destroyed by the fear of other demons. When someone transformed, you could tell if they were a devil, even though they would otherwise look like any other resident of hell. Sure, you would be aware, because when they changed, a demonic spiked tail would emerge from their backside and two black wings would emerge from their backs. Soon, a pure ebony black metal demonic armor would cover their entire body. They would appear as knights, but they would be demonic. One of these devils was Lucifer, and he was so strong that only a god could defeat him. The so-called all-powerful Jubi had more power in its entire body than Lucifer had in his pinky. In order to challenge Yami and succeed him as the ruler of hell, the man once betrayed Yami and left his army to form his own. That's just a bit of hell's history because Lucifer's actions rocked hell to its foundation. Yami and Lucifer were at war within our realm, which would ultimately lead to its destruction. Around that time, I was the only person still alive after my parents were killed. The only person who survived the attack on our house was me. My parents were extremely powerful individuals in their own right. They were definitely not as good as Lucifer, but I was fairly certain that one of them could even take on a legion of demons by himself. Both of them were killed. My mother gave her life to protect me, and the assailant was a jealous devil who detested my mother because she was my father's wife. Since that day, my sole goal has been to become stronger than I was before in order to avoid being killed by a member of my own race. It may sound absurd, but at the time, I was a devil who craved power. And I got it. I met the one person I never imagined meeting during my travels. Lucifer, who had been destroying a legion of Yami's soldiers at the time, suddenly appeared before me and gazed at me calculatingly. Soon after, the devil told me that he saw so much potential in me that it was almost frightening. To my surprise, he offered to mentor me, take me under his wing, and make me a soldier. Over the centuries that I served him, I learned a great deal and developed greater control over my abilities. I didn't learn much about the art, but by Lucifer's standards, I was already an expert in the three elements of hellfire, darkness, and demon magic, and I was well known throughout hell for my proficiency in each of them. Personally, though, I preferred to be a more versatile fighter who also enjoyed close combat. Lucifer advised me to use a weapon of my own choosing, and I heeded his advice. I started with a Nodaichi. I was able to master the weapon very fast, even surpassing Lucifer's expectations. Later, centuries went by, and I continued to train, becoming stronger every day as I battled other demons. As a fellow devil working under Lucifer, I soon gained the fear of many in hell for not only my fighting prowess but also my callousness and ruthlessness, as I killed those who opposed me. By Hell's standards, I was considered a natural prodigy when it came to combat skills. In a day or a week, I could learn spells that others would take a year to learn, and I could quickly come up with strategic plans. I began to become even more known as a real nightmare for my adversaries while I was a soldier in Lucifer's employ. I was declared to be one of Hell's demon titans, which is the highest rank a demon or devil can achieve in Hell since it places one just beneath that of God. I simply wanted to get stronger, which I did, but it was never enough for me, so I never really cared what rank I was given. The only thing I discovered was that Lucifer started to worry that I was getting too strong every day. After a millennium of studying under him, he never imagined that I would catch up to him. At times, the devil believed that I would grow so powerful that I would come to destroy him and strip him of his authority. I knew Lucifer was scared of me, but I kept quiet about it. Instead, the man trained me to increase my power. However, I was aware that Lucifer was losing his mind because of his god complex, which made him constantly believe that his power made him a god. Eventually, the power overcame him, and he became consumed by his power. His demonic instincts overcame his common sense, and he quickly transformed into a power-hungry abomination that was only a shadow of the person he had been. But I wasn't any better back then. As a child, I wanted power more than anything else, even if it meant going to extreme lengths. However, as the years passed, my goals shifted, and I no longer craved power. Instead, I wanted to fight Cammy's forces, overthrow her rule, and change it for the better or worse. I only knew that this system needed to be altered because Cammy herself had to be blind to fail to notice that some of her own subordinates were breaking her own rules and acting in ways that suited them. Such as giving bloodlines or keke genke to humans. That was a big mistake because people became even more conceited and thought they were really powerful. They believed they were superior to everyone else, including their own creators, because they could control the elements or alter gravity. The pitiful mortals don't understand what power is. I was stating that my ideal was to alter the system, but I'm getting off topic. It wasn't until a few years later that I realized something was amiss. I had been given the order to capture one of Yami's main points, a fortress that has stood the test of time since the beginning, when I was out with my own army under my command. Yes, we prevailed, but I soon discovered that I had been duped. When Lucifer arrived, I was still exhausted from fighting one of Yami's generals, according to my own master. That day, Lucifer betrayed me by attacking me and killing my men. Despite the fact that I repeatedly asked him the same questions, I didn't back down. "Naruto, you've become too strong. I can't have you kill me later," was the answer. The man was losing it, but I wasn't shocked. I did fight back, but despite my injuries from that fateful day, I managed to maintain my level of competition with Lucifer. Demons of all kinds gathered to witness our titanic battle, which shook Hell itself and caused the realm to tremble. Our clashes split the Sea of Blood in half and destroyed mountains. We battled for 3 days, and despite my injuries, my divine endurance made up for it. It even attracted Yami's attention. Our Yuki-level energies caused even the lowest-level demons to perish in our battle. With every attack, the burned ground itself grew more cratered. As befitted our titles as Hell's Demon Titans, it was a true battle between the devils of our power. However, I knew I would lose because I was too wounded from fighting Yami's general to defeat Lucifer that day. Like me, Lucifer was beaten and bruised, but he wasn't spared either. Only I was slightly worse off because something happened just as Lucifer was ready to deliver the final blow. Something inside of me exploded, and I was able to avoid the fatal blow because my anger, hatred, and betrayal surged through me. Despite my defeat, I gave my former master a few final words before leaving the fight. "Lucifer, you have won today, I promise you, but don't worry, you haven't seen the last of me because you don't realize what you've done. I had father-like faith in you, but you do this. Maybe I won't kill you right now, but believe me when I say that I will tear out and crush your heart right in front of you." Following this, I hid away from the completely demolished battlefield, tending to my injuries and growing stronger every day. This time, though, I would keep my word and kill Lucifer no matter what. After I recovered completely, I spent the year hiding in the more populated cities of Hell, gaining strength, speed, and expanding my knowledge to include other demon magic, hellfire, and darkness manipulation techniques. Learning what I could, developing my own methods, and attacking Lucifer's and Yami's forces wherever I could, crippling them and reminding my former master that I was still alive and waiting to attack. I faced Lucifer a few times. In some of those encounters, I prevailed, in others, we drew, and in still others, I lost. However, something odd happened on the way to my house after I had blown up another legion of Lucifer's demons and was returning home. Naruto POV over. He was a tall, regal looking man who was 6 feet 2 inches and exuded confidence in his own abilities while walking along the dirt road of hell. He was wearing a black shirt with a crimson high collar over it. The collared shirt had black lines running down the middle, and the top was separated with the ends sticking straight up. His collared shirt was visible through a black hooded cloak that was also separated. The sleeves extended all the way down to his wrists, and 2 chains hung from the neck portion of the cloak. He wore black combat gloves there as well. His cloak had patterns on both of its divided sides that depicted flames in a mixture of red, purple, and a demonic green hues that gave the impression of ethereal flames. Below were black armor, integrated pants and boots with a black plating. However, many people who knew him because of his previous reputation would flee in terror at the sight of this man. Because the man's skin was pale, not the deathly pale that many demons in hell had, but a glowing pale that was odd for any type of hellish dwelling. He was on the body of something from hell, but his face was fit for a god. He was marked with what appeared to be curved horns, a demonic tribal design. Lines ran down his face, revealing the red demonic runes inside his eyes. However, the man's eyes were a dark purple that was somewhere in the middle of the violet spectrum. These eyes had a sinister vibe, but they also had a strange, hidden power. His golden, hued hair was startlingly spiky. He wore his hair in a medium-sized, spiky ponytail because it was too long. In comparison to the ruthless demons that prowl around in hell, this man appeared to be considerably more civilized and intimidating overall. This individual was Hellwing Naruto, the demon titan of hell and Lucifer's enmity. The devil had been preparing for his impending confrontation with Lucifer for countless millennia since Naruto's battle with Lucifer. Since he had virtually destroyed Lucifer's armies that he had sent to kill him, he continued to live up to his reputation as the most vicious yet merciless demon in hell. He had not been scratched by any demon because none of them could match his strength. Only Lucifer knew that he was on an equal footing with him. The legendary devil scowled as he felt a sudden pull on his consciousness as his feet struck the ground. What the? A call? Right now, I'm not in the mood for a pitiful mortal. Unaware of how annoying the upcoming months would be, Naruto removed the pull on his body. 5 months later, 5 months had passed since the first summoning attempt, and since he had cancelled it, more summonses had been sent out than ever before, which irritated Naruto even more given how much more frequent they had become. The fact that this human was so obstinate in calling forth greatly irritated the devil. You see, humans occasionally possess the power to summon a demon from hell to perform their services, but only if they are offered a reward. Currently, the higher a demon's rank, the higher the cost of their services. The cost of calling Naruto was the highest of all since he was the most powerful demon, standing next to Lucifer. He growled in frustration and remarked, "Grr, this is getting annoying. Just need to find out what this human wants before I kill him or her." Naruto allowed the pull to lead him, and a black portal dragged him into the air. His demonic immortal life will be forever altered if he is unaware of this incident. The Hokage monument in Konohagakure, a woman wearing formal attire with her red hair tied in a bun was standing atop the recently designated Hokage monument. By human standards, her entire body, including her face, was that of a goddess. Even though her violet eyes and milky white skin shone in the midnight sky, they were currently filled with intense anger and hatred towards something or someone. She appeared absolutely royal because she was dressed in a kimono that had swirls of some sort all over it. This woman was Uzumaki Mito, the Shodem Hokage Hashirama Senju's wife and the heir to the Uzumaki clan. Her deep violet eyes were glaring at Hashirama's stone face with a murderous gleam exactly now. She was clenching her fists so tightly that blood was dripping from her pale white knuckles. How intense was the clenching? She turned around, though, after hearing the sound of swirling and the cackling of electricity. As she turned to face the summoning circle, her eyes glowed with satisfaction, and she smiled as she watched the black swirling portal begin to slowly open up. She said, "Thank God, someone took my call," as the portal fully opened and she saw something emerge from it. As she stared at the devilishly attractive but godly man in front of her, her breath caught in her throat. Her face flushed as she scanned his body with wide, open eyes, but then his eyes snapped open, causing her to tense up at the menacing expression in his purple, evil eyes. Mito felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up just by looking at his body. No, just by being in his presence for a few seconds, and every fiber in her body cried out for her to run away. However, she was unable to do so, not because her legs were paralyzed with fear, but because she had a reason for calling someone like him to her realm. However, this man's aura sent all of her senses into overdrive, and her soul trembled in fear before his piercing purple eyes. At what he was witnessing, Naruto himself raised an eyebrow in his mind. First of all, he had to acknowledge that the mortal woman was extremely beautiful, even by demon standards, which said a lot. Secondly, she was different from many other humans in that she had not flinched or fled like cowards. Last but not least, he felt the Kyuubi no Kitsune's Yuki within her, which made him snort a little. Does that imply that she was that little fox's Jinchuriki? Because they were held captive by humans for a long time and kept on leashes as pets or as weapons to carry out their commands. Biju in hell were nothing more than a mockery to their fellow demons. Being a Biju, and even worse, a Jinchuriki, was a truly pitiful existence because he was aware of how much people hated things they couldn't comprehend or control for themselves. When he sensed the Kyuubi's fear, he mentally grinned a little because it was essentially using this human as a trigger to let out its fear and demonstrate to him that it was obedient in his presence. "Why did you call me mortal here?" he grunted in annoyance as he spoke. Mito instantly bowed, causing Naruto to slightly raise an eyebrow. Usually, people would ask demons for something without considering that they were in the presence of a creature that could kill them at any moment. This one, however, was unique. She was respectful and knew when to show deference to someone with far more authority than herself. "I apologize for calling on you so often, your lordship, but I was in dire need of assistance and would do whatever it took to get it. Even if it means calling forth a demon," she said in a tone appropriate to Naruto's speech. "I see. Would you happen to know what the cost of calling forth a demon is?" Only to have her stare at him bewildered, causing him to growl inwardly in frustration. This caused Naruto to chuckle coldly in amusement. No. All I know is that it's a last resort technique only meant for the Uzumakis. The other pieces of information have been lost for centuries since it was written by the Rakudo Sennin himself. Since he was the one who brought about the shinobi era, its wars, and Biju, he was, by all rights, a demon made human. What a miserable human he was. Because he disobeyed Kami's wishes, the man was a laughing stock in hell and is still imprisoned in the 9th level of hell. Let me explain the summoning's rules to you human. As you can see, demons don't perform tasks for free. The first is that we want something of equal value in return for the work you do. Mito scowled as he took this information in, but he accepted it nonetheless. The higher the demon you summoned, the higher the exchange price is. For instance, if you summoned a low-class demon, your exchange for its service is a minimum. "So, what class are you, by chance?" Only for Naruto to look at her impassively before speaking in a dry tone that was slightly amused. He said, "I'm the highest level a demon could ever be, I'm a demon titan," and she gave him a startled look before recalling why she had called him. In her eyes, the acceptance returned as swiftly as it had vanished. Naruto raised an eyebrow in interest at this. "What do you want me to do, mortal by chance? I need your help. My husband used an Uzumaki Fuinjutsu upon me, making me look like I was in love with him." I just growled a little before looking at him with eyes that held so much anger and hatred that it honestly surprised him that a mortal could have such a hatred, but also that there was an equal amount of desperation and pleading in her violet orbs. The Fuinjutsu, which developed into this specific seal, was actually inherited from a demon who was an expert in demon magic. It requires the user's blood, causes the target to lose all sense of reason, turns them into drones, and makes them obey all of the user's commands. This immediately caught Naruto's attention. "The bastard has been using our arranged marriage as a way for Konoha to use my clan by me as the link." Naruto's slight protectiveness toward women was one of the few things about him that no one knew. He still recalls the numerous demons his father used to keep his mother safe when they attempted to take her away. Furthermore, it was unexpected that this person was using a seal of that kind, but here we have another power. Hungry individual who uses others for personal gain. A prime illustration of why people in general are such a vile species. Naruto shook his head and spoke with a little more authority and a hint of protectiveness. "I understand. What specifically do you want me to do?" This mortal actually kneeled before Mito, her head touching the ground in total obedience in the Dagiza position. Her voice sounded true, despite how quiet it was, but there was begging and desperation in it. "I need you to kill Hashirama and take these seals off of me." This caused Naruto to twitch his lips. "He has by all rights violated the agreement between my clan and Konoha, and I want his death to pay the price for it." This woman was interesting. She was willing to do anything to get rid of the man who had deceived her. She looks at him in agreement, not really caring how much it would cost. "Oh, I see, the removal of those seals and of the death of this human is something that can be done, but the price is very steep. It must not be that awful." "Correct. As long as that man is held accountable for his crimes against my clan and me, I don't care how much it costs," causing Naruto to nod. Her eyes widened in horror as she said, "Very well then, the price is your soul." "Her spirit?" Was that the cost of the transaction? She spoke in a tremulous voice while gazing up at the creature she had called forth. My soul. Do you need anything else from me? Naruto scowled at this and then closed his eyes in contemplation. He had the option to simply decline and let her decide whether or not to accept the offer, but something inside of him told him to give her another option. It was like a bothersome flea that isn't quite biting you. He looked at her pleading form and realized that the only other thing he could do was to speak. The alternative is that you would have to give up your humanity on the day of your death, which would mean that I would be there to take your soul and put it into a demon body, forcing you to serve as my slave for all eternity. Knowing that he wouldn't have any other options, his tone broke all arguments when he said, "It is your choice, mortal." Mito scowled as she gave this some serious thought. She could either sacrifice her soul, which would undoubtedly suffer in hell for calling forth a demon, or choose the second option, in which she was already Hashirama's slave, which was terrible enough because he mistreated her but nothing more. But to turn into this devil's slave and a demon? In all honesty, she felt that it would be preferable to see him act impartially toward her, whereas Hashirama was more of an aggressive and dishonest individual. She had only met this being once, but she felt more at ease around him than any other person because of the slight protective aura she sensed from him. This confused her somewhat. There was nothing else to do but think about her choices. Calling forth a demon was a surefire way to end up in hell, and heaven was shut off to you forever. I accept, as long as that bastard is held accountable for his actions, causing Naruto's eyes to enlarge slightly before settling back to normal. Although he maintained his impassive exterior, he was secretly reflecting on how much more intriguing this mortal woman was becoming in his opinion. She is prepared to turn into a demon in order to serve me forever, all for the purpose of killing this man and removing those seals from her. I'm beginning to like this one. She grinned broadly as she said, "Well, I see very well, then the deal is accepted." Thank you, your lordship," but he waved it away with a blank expression. "No lord. Ship, anyway, show me these seals of yours," she said, blushing slightly as she remembered their precise location. She shakily reached for her kimono and opened it slightly to reveal her stomach. Her stomach was toned, and it was evident that she took her training very seriously. He would have to remind himself that she was a serious person when it came to fighting. She followed the instructions to channel your chakra, before a Fuinjutsu seal over her navel revealed that it was the same seal that held the Kyuubi no Kitsune. A second layered seal then appeared over this seal, forcing her to open her kimono even more to her embarrassment. In order to examine the seal, Naruto ran his hand over it, making physical contact that caused Mito to shudder. With his eyes closed and focused, Naruto failed to notice Mito's face blushing slightly, which intensified every second as his hand continued to examine the seal. Since Hashirama had only kissed her to symbolize the wedding, Mito had never been touched by a man before and had to suppress a groan when his hand passed over her sensitive, soft skin. Naruto's eyes opened, and then the hand on Mito's stomach was enveloped in a dark purple aura. The seals first. Hatsubai. Akuma no Yona Magiku. The purple Yukai then left Naruto's hand and spread throughout the enslavement seal, causing it to corrode before Mito's astonishment caused it to flake off like dry paint and turn to dust in the wind. Demon magic. Release. Mito nearly burst with happiness when she saw the seal removed entirely, knowing that she was nearly free of Hashirama's slavery. Thank you. But Naruto nods before continuing. The second question is, where is Hashirama Senju? She gestured toward the big compound in the forest and over the monument. To Mito's surprise, Naruto nodded when he saw this, then picked her up and tossed her over his shoulder. What are you doing, WW? She inquired, her face flushed, wondering what her lord would do. She blushed because she could feel Naruto's muscles through his clothes, and she has to admit that she had never felt anything like that before. They were as hard as steel. We will arrive at the compound. What were your thoughts? Before Mito could respond, Naruto's body emitted a purplish glow before he teleported away, leaving behind a purple glow that indicated his location before vanishing into thin air. When they reached the compound, Naruto landed on the roof with Mito on his shoulder, leaving Uzumaki speechless at how quickly they had gone from one location to another. Okay, tell me where Hashirama's room is, she said, indicating the building at the far corner in the west that housed the main portion of the compound. After they leapt over the rooftops and landed soundlessly on the ground, Naruto quietly placed Mito down, her unsteady legs barely supporting her as she remained in awe of Naruto's ability to teleport between locations. She nodded quickly, and they entered the building, turning off all the traps without making a sound. Follow me. I want you to witness my end of the bargain so you would know I tell the truth of his death, she said. Naruto entered and saw Hashirama's sleeping form, The only part of his body that was visible was his head because the rest of it was hidden by the blankets. When Naruto saw his target, he moved swiftly, and Mito silently watched in satisfaction, knowing that Hashirama would receive his just rewards. Naruto appeared over Hashirama's sleeping body, covered the man's head with his hand, and then spoke softly. As soon as Naruto said, Akuma no Yona Magiku, Shinshoku Saripu. Demon Magic. Eroding Sleep. A greenish aura enveloped his hand before he placed it on Hashirama's, causing the man's eyes to open in shock. However, before he could say anything, Naruto's other hand abruptly slapped his mouth. Mito watched with fascination as the spell quickly took effect, causing Hashirama's body to begin emitting green smoke, his face to wrinkle and dry out, and his eyes to slowly look at her with hate and rage before melting into a greenish liquid like the rest of his body. His skeleton was all that remained. She exclaimed, "Wow!" as Naruto got to his feet and approached Mito. Knowing that he had aided her more than anyone else in a matter of minutes, she bowed as soon as she saw him approaching. When Naruto saw this, he tapped her shoulder, causing her to look up before he spoke. To her confusion, she pulled her kimono down slightly to reveal her flawless, pale shoulder. "Now it's your turn. Please show me your right shoulder." After that, Naruto placed his yukai on her shoulder after gathering it in his index finger. Naruto pulled his finger back to reveal the Slave of Hellwing symbol before it vanished into her skin, causing her to bite back a scream from the burning sensation. She glanced up in confusion, but as the dark portal whirled around his feet, he turned around and spoke. "That symbol indicates that you are my slave. I will know when the time comes and I will be present to take your soul with me." Despite having a slave mark on her body, she simply nodded and smiled tearfully, saying, "Until then, mortal, enjoy your last few years of your human life." She was all too happy to be the slave of the very person who had saved her from the Hashirama nightmare. "Before you leave, could you tell me your name?" As the dark portal was about to open, Naruto simply glanced over his shoulder. Before the portal slowly transformed into his form and took him back to hell, he said with a ghostly smile, "Ah yes. My name is Naruto. Hellwing Naruto. Remember it well." With admiration shining in her eyes, Mito simply nodded. With that, Naruto's body was completely encased in the portal that separated master and slave for the ensuing years. "I will forever, Naruto. Sama." Hell, he fell from the sky, landed in a crouch, and then rose again. Naruto looked up into the portal and watched it completely close before he laughed a little, which, to many, would have made demons tremble with fear due to its ominous vibe. "What a fascinating woman she is for a mortal. I wonder what she will be like as a demon." The devil then proceeded to return to his home, where he waited for the death of his newest slave over the course of the following few years, only for her to reincarnate as something different. Naruto was unaware that his immortal life would become extremely busy over the ensuing centuries. Hell with Naruto 1 millennium later. It had been a millennium in hell ever since Mito summoned Naruto, helped him with her, and labeled her his slave. Since then, Naruto had been occupied with attacking both Lucifer's and Yami's armies while he waited for her to die, because he received an invitation to join Yami's general staff. As expected, Yami was upset that he had been turned down to be one of his generals and issued a complete warrant for his arrest. Since then, he has been eliminating all demons and armies that Lucifer or Yami have sent his way, increasing his strength with every conflict. He was certain that he was strong, but Lucifer was also a devil, so he would have also grown stronger. Because of his power and his actions in fighting Lucifer and Yami on both sides, he gained even more notoriety and reputation throughout hell. The fact that a single entity in hell could defeat two opposing forces by himself was a legend in and of itself. Through Yami's words to his fellow gods, his actions and deeds have even reached heaven itself, but none of them have had a significant impact because hell is the domain of demons, where the unholy creatures dwell. Since then, the legendary devil had remained the same and was currently battling Lucifer's army of demons. There were only a lot more of this one. Naruto leapt over another demon and stabbed it with his hand behind him. He then pulled it out along with the demon's brain, shoved it into another's mouth, and tore off its head, splattering blood across the blood-soaked ground. Naruto turned around, looking behind him, and punched another demon's rib cage, breaking it like a mirror. He caught the demon by the face at that very moment, lifted him off the ground, and then crushed his skull like a balloon. Naruto said, gesturing with his hand toward the approaching demon horde. He said calmly, "Haru. Funshutsu Pira, Hellfire. Erupting Pillar," and then a crimson flame with black and violet flames mixed and circled around the horde of demons. Before they knew it, it had completely circled them, confusing them. Beneath them, A massive pillar of hellfire erupted, destroying all of their flesh, muscle, and bone. Even the ash was burned away, leaving behind only a scorched ground with fire flickers. Naruto turned around again and swept his arm to 20 more demons before he spoke. Before a pure black sphere formed in Naruto's hand and shot straight into the demons before exploding in an orb of darkness. The phrase, Bakuhatsu no Yami, Dama, exploding darkness sphere, was utterly destroyed from the inside out. Naruto disregarded their cries and the numerous demon bodies surrounding him. Lucifer, you are a complete idiot. These demons are far less powerful than the others. Never could train your other lesser subordinates right. Naruto shook his head and left without getting any scratches or bloodstains on him. There were hundreds or even thousands of dead demons behind him. The battlefield, which was covered in blood, was surrounded by hellfire flames. The light from the flames shone in Naruto's ominous purple eyes. Naruto felt a sudden pull as he was a few yards away, and then he looked up at the black clouds of hell with a look of recognition in his eyes. Before the dark portal materialized in front of him, Naruto snapped his fingers and said, "Looks like it's time, her death has arrived." He sighed as he passed, aware that he was going to get a new addition to his life. Ningenkai, Konohagakure, and Uzumaki Mito's room. Arriving in a sparsely furnished room, Naruto glanced around before focusing on the ancient, wrinkly body of Uzumaki Mito. He recognized her because he could feel the mark he had left on her years prior, which caused his Yukai to quickly release in his appearance. At that moment, he saw her blue, glowing soul emerge from her body, and when it was fully formed, he saw her as he had known her. Well, the seal must have permanently bonded her youthful appearance to her soul, marking her youthful form at the time. Mito opened her eyes and scanned her surroundings before turning to face her bed. She was 120 years old when she finally passed away, and her eyes widened before they remembered what had happened. The Uzumaki longevity had taken a heavy toll on her. She was 120 years old. Mito. It's time, she heard as she glanced around the room. Her eyes widened momentarily before gaining a full recognition look, and then another glance briefly appeared before being swiftly concealed. Oh, Naruto. Sama, I suppose it's time now, the devil said, nodding. Nodding in agreement, Naruto sighed and said, "Very well, I am ready." He then proceeded to her lifeless body and picked it up gently, causing her soul to raise an eyebrow in inquiry. Observing this, he said. With a snap, the dark, winding portal opened, and Naruto strode straight to it. "I need your human body for the ritual in order for you to become a demon," he said. But when he looked back, he saw Mito pick up something and approach him. Examining his eyes closely, he recognized it as an old picture frame. According to what he could see, it was Mito in her human old body, grinning broadly, holding a young, long-haired, red head in her arms, and having violet eyes that were the same color as her own but much more vibrant and full of life. "I apologize, Naruto. Sama. I was just getting something personal. Thank you for giving me the time to get this," she said appreciatively, and he simply nodded before mindlessly following her through the portal. Being aware that she had only just begun her new life as Naruto's slave. Hell, as Naruto emerged from the dark portal, he glanced back to see Uzumaki Mito's soul form surveying the area with wonder and a hint of anxiety. It makes sense. After all, people are frequently subjected to unjustified torture here. However, she was a slave and would now reside in this realm. He spoke hastily because he could already feel the Yukai gathered around her soul. "Mito. Come, we must leave," she said, nodding slightly as an odd energy that was much stronger than the Kyubis began to build inside of her. After a while, she followed him, and the energy seemed to vanish, to be replaced by the Yukai emanating from Naruto. How will this ritual by chance work? Anyo Naruto. Sama." After which he simply closed his eyes and knelt down. "Well, first of all, since you looked the same when I met you, your body needs to be young so your soul can fit perfectly." This caused her to look at him bewildered. "How would you restore my body to its youthful state?" But before he could say anything, Naruto touched Mito's human body. In Akuma no Yona Magiku, Renewero, Demon Magic. Renewal. Mito saw her body glow white before it faded, revealing to her a rejuvenated body once more, just as she remembered it from her first encounter with Naruto. As the Yukai in hell congregate within the body, turning you into a demon, it needs the soul. In this case, you and your dead body. Now, when I make it, get into the circle. She nodded, blindly obeying her master's command. "Very well then," he said, nicking his finger and drawing some blood. He then drew a 6-foot circle with his blood, positioned Mito's human body inside, and then drew several complex symbols that all connected to her body. Before she heard him speak, Mito kept a close eye on him. She pushed herself back into her body after hearing the words, "Now get into the body." Then, yelling, Naruto slammed his hands on the circle. Demon Magic. Ritual. Combine soul and body. Akuma Magiku. Gishiki wa. Tamashi to Nikutai o Ketsugo Suru. Naruto was slightly blinded by a burst of light. Naruto arched an eyebrow in mild surprise as the light faded. He was looking for a word, and Mito didn't look exactly the same as when he first met her. Instead, she looked more. Perhaps it has changed. In any case, she looked much more stunning than she had previously, wearing only a basic black kimono with crimson trim around the edges instead of the same outfit she had on when she first met him. She may have had a DD cup, but her bust was much larger now. She had glowing porcelain skin, just as she had when she was a human. Although her eyes were identical, Naruto was particularly drawn to the way the Yukai coursing through her felt similar to his own. That only meant one thing. Wow, even though I don't look all that different, I feel so different. Looking down at her bust, she added in her mind, well, except the breasts, that was a surprise. Well, you really gave up your humanity and my slave when we made that agreement. However, I'm shocked at the demon you turned into. She went wide-eyed for a moment before they returned to normal. You're a devil, just like me. It must be because my Yukai flowed into you when I came to get you. My energy must have channeled slowly into you. I see, you say, but how can I tell if I've turned into this devil? Naruto simply sighed and closed his eyes. We devils undergo a metamorphosis that makes us identifiable. Like me, you'll learn to get yours. He turned and began to walk away, with her smiling softly behind him. Now come, you have training to do. I won't have a weak slave. I will be teaching you from here on out about the techniques we use here in hell. As she gazed at the shape of her new master, she felt a knot in her stomach and said, "Thank you, Naruto." Sama. Knowing that her new life would be quite interesting from this point on, she hurried to follow him. Later. Hell millenniums later, thousands of years later. Millenniums have passed since Naruto acquired his slave, the now demonic woman Uzumaki Mito, and he has spent the innumerable years since then training both her and himself. To her surprise, he had to spend the majority of his time teaching her the three primary abilities of hell and her devil abilities because he couldn't let her go out with him until she could take care of herself. To keep Lucifer and Yami from believing he had given up, he had, of course, emerged from hiding a few times to defeat an army or two of them. Given that Mito had shown himself to be an excellent student under his guidance, the outcomes were, to put it mildly, unexpected. She specialized in demon magic, darkness skills, and her fuinjutsu, but she was more of a long-range fighter than anything else. She learned how to combine those skills with demon magic after taking them from Ningenkai. She was obviously not up to par when facing a heavenly army of angels, but she can handle demons of all kinds quite well on her own. She was far from Lucifer's level, but she still required a lot of training before that. She had transformed into a real devil, but naturally, she was initially alarmed by how she looked. However, Naruto's assurances about how to change back helped her quickly learn how to do so. All things considered, Naruto could be considered a master of learning, possibly even a genius when it came to fighting. He didn't let up either. He had been training by engaging in combat with Mito and the armies of Lucifer and Yami. It was nice to fight one of your own kind, even though she was far below his level. However, Naruto's relationship with Mito has been peculiar over the years. Even though she was a former mortal, he wasn't completely heartless toward her because she was different from the other conceited idiots, and he knew this because she was very respectful and obedient to him. Because in addition to being her master, he was also her teacher and guardian. When word spread that Naruto had a slave, a lot of demons came to find out who it was. When they saw Mito's divine beauty, they all tried to take her away. Because she wasn't strong enough for some of those demons, Naruto ended up killing a lot of them or tearing them apart. Naturally, this infuriated the super-powered devil, and to Mito's surprise, a demon titan named Gilgamesh challenged Naruto for Mito's right. In less than 3 minutes, Naruto defeated the draconic demon by himself. Naturally, news of a demon with the same rank as his own spread like a demonic wildfire throughout hell. Many discovered that in less than 3 minutes, Naruto not only defeated a demon titan but also Gilgamesh, one of the strongest demons in hell. Since then, Mito had spent a lot more time with him than a slave should. Perhaps it was his violent reaction to the demon's desire for her. Perhaps it was because she felt so safe in his presence. She was genuinely unsure of her feelings, but she did occasionally see a side of her master during one of their sparring sessions that she didn't usually see. Rewind. Mito Uzumaki, Hellwing Naruto's slave, was panting on the ground. She was exhausted from the all-day training session her master had taken her to. She felt she was getting stronger every day they sparred, so she never complained. Her typical bun was still in place, and she was currently perspiring. Craters from the demon magic and darkness attacks she had been practicing were scattered across the ground. With his arms folded across his chest and his gaze sweeping the ground before settling on his slave, Naruto stood next to her, his eyes full of approval. She was fairly exhausted. Exhausted would be a more accurate description. She had to use 20% of his power to fight him. In contrast to her, he didn't have to change even then. Naruto turned away and nodded in agreement before continuing. With a tone of approval, he said, "Your training is done for the day, Mito. Go rest. You've earned it." This made her feel very warm. When she received his approval for her training methods, she always felt that way. He was constantly keeping an eye on her to make sure she needed assistance or to prevent any malfunctions with her attacks. Although it was challenging to gain his admiration, she has improved with each training session. Before she got up on her unsteady legs and attempted to walk back to the house, she collapsed to her knees from exhaustion. "Thank you, Naruto. Sama. I shall go rest. I really need it, she said. She was panting heavily and felt a little embarrassed about tripping in front of her master. She felt herself being raised when she heard footsteps approaching and her master supporting her by placing her right arm over his shoulder and his other arm supporting her other side. Naturally, the contact caused her to flush a little, but she managed to hide it well. "Hey, what are you doing, Naruto? Sama?" she asked in confusion because she had always had to walk back to the house to rest even though her master had previously been there to assist with her training. However, she was too tired to do anything this time. She nodded slightly before resting her head slightly on Naruto's shoulder as he escorted her back to her room. Naruto closed his eyes and said, "You're too tired to move, Mito. I can see this. I shall help you to your room where you can rest." After they were inside, Naruto spread out the sheets and covers and laid her down, adding in her mind as she went, before covering her. He then removed the needle that was holding her hair up in a bun, revealing her long, straight maroon hair as it fell onto her back. She didn't notice the flicker of emotion in his eyes when he did this. She couldn't even talk because she was so shocked that he was putting her to bed. Naruto turned away and peered over his shoulder. Before shutting the door, he said, "You did exceptional today, Mito. Get some rest. You've earned it." This left his slave to reflect on his recent attitude. His eyes had a slightly softer expression than they had previously had. Why is that? It's so perplexing that despite being a devil and a demon titan who has lived for countless eons, Naruto Sama seemed so kind to me. After that, she closed her eyes and considered the minor adjustments being made to her master. The following day, while putting her hair up in her typical bun, Mito emerged from her room to find her master standing on the balcony with a view of hell. She heard him talk as she approached him. "I'm glad you're awake, Mito. Your training will resume later today, so be ready," he said with his typical lack of interest, which she was aware of. She nodded as she looked at him, believing that what she had witnessed the day before had only been a dream. "All right, Naruto Sama, I'll go get ready." She then turned around and started to walk away. "Oh," and Mito caused her to turn slightly inquisitively. Yes, she was interested in what her master had to say. He continued to gaze over the balcony as he said, "You look better without the bun. It makes you more beautiful." Since he had never before given her a compliment, he was unaware of the wide-eyed expression she was giving him. The Uzumaki woman was looking at her master in utter disbelief. She didn't really expect him to do this, nor did she even think he would. However, as soon as realization set in, her hands trembled with the needle that would put her hair in a bun before she could control herself, and she blushed greatly. As she spoke, a broad smile stretched across her face, revealing her lovely features. She said, T. Thank you, and Naruto Sama," before he waved her away, causing her to stagger back inside the house to prepare for the next phase of her training. However, there was also a tiny ghost of a smile on Naruto's own face. End of flashback. She has never put her hair in a bun since, allowing it to grow out until it reaches her lower back. Her two bangs frame her face, adding to her allure to the point where some people mistake her for a succubus. All that mattered to her was that it appeared to please her master. Since Lucifer had become increasingly determined to kill Naruto by any means over the years, including sending the three-headed dog Cerberus Hell's Gate Guardian, Naruto and Mito were walking along the dirt road of hell on their way to battle another legion of demons. Naturally, Naruto was irritated by this, and it didn't help that he killed every single demon that was swarming over Mito that day. Since Cerberus was literally neutered by Naruto on that day before being sent flying across hell and into Lucifer's castle, it was unfortunate for the demonic dog that it chose the wrong day to urinate off Naruto. That day, Naruto became agitated and used the Guardian of Hell's Gates as an example to demonstrate that he shouldn't be irritated. Naruto frowned, which Mito caught, and then he felt a tug, the same tug he had felt when Mito had first called him. Is something amiss with Naruto? Sama? He had never exhibited this reaction before, so he was concerned because it seemed like something was bothering him more than the bothersome demons that frequent her. His eyes also conveyed a great deal of annoyance. He said with a gloomy expression that made Mito shudder, "No, it's just a summoning. I suppose I'll accept it. Come, Mito. Let's go see what this mortal has summoned us for before I kill it for annoying me." Above them, a swirling, dark portal opened, causing them to float straight into one. Mito was curious as to who had summoned the demons, and he was simply annoyed by the summoning. The Forest of Death. Konohagakure standing atop the vast Forest of Death was a stunning woman who appeared to be around 22 years old. Her entire appearance, by all measures, resembled the flesh of a goddess. Her heart-shaped face was framed by two bangs and long, maroon hair that reached her legs, giving her an angelic appearance. Her eyes had the color of deep violet, and they were filled with anger and hatred that would make any weak-willed person faint or even faint. With the moonlight shining on her, her pale porcelain skin gleamed brilliantly in the shadowy forest. Her knuckles were popping and blood was dripping from her hands as her arms shook and her teeth were clenched so tightly they might shatter. However, the woman's enlarged abdomen indicated that she was in her later months of pregnancy. This woman was Namikaze Minato's wife and the last surviving Uzumaki Kushina. The woman was currently standing in front of the same summoning seal that Uzumaki Mito, her role model and old friend, had given her in case something really terrible occurred. She was cautioned to use this as a last resort after being given it. "I'm telling you, Kit, you had no other option. In addition, if you're lucky, you might just call forth a demon that is more honorable than the ones I've seen in the past. I worry about my unborn child. What would she do without me here? I know Akemi-chan, but Mito Sama always warned me as a child that using this summoning was a surefire way to go to hell. I have no faith in anyone in the Leaf except you, and I definitely don't trust that jerk Minato and Hiruzen. I understand, Kit, but this is the best way to ensure that your daughter has a happy life after birth. Because of his sins, that human, Namikaze, must die." Akemi muttered, "Hell, with your luck, you might summon the same demon Mito-chan summoned." Kushina heard her and understood what she was referring to. "Yes, even though it's extremely unlikely, I'm kind of hoping that it is because you've told me about this demon before. I just hope it's someone like him and not some mistrustful demon." A dark portal began to open beneath the summoning circle, but this time it was opening for two people of the size. That's when she felt the sudden pulse of Yukai. However, when it opened completely and the first person left, Kushina willingly blushed uncontrollably at the sight of the Adonis-like man in front of her. "Oh, Kami. That's Kit. Mito-chan was aided by that very demon. Kit, you're very fortunate. He has a slight resemblance to that bastard Minato, but only in terms of hair, and even then, it's only a slight one. All the other things about him are." When the second individual emerged, Kushina and Akemi both gasped in surprise because it was a childhood friend. Uzumaki Mito was considerably more attractive than she appeared in the photos taken when she was younger. Her hair reached her lower back and was longer than usual, not in her typical bun. Her attire, however, was significantly different. Instead of the royal-looking kimono she had previously worn, she now wore a battle-fitting kimono that was crimson in color with black trim around the edges. With the Uzumaki clan emblem engraved on her back and flames encircling it like a ring of fire to protect it, the kimono was covered in flame designs. However, Kushina noticed her aura. She walked with a power and confidence that most people couldn't believe, only the man in front of her knew. She carried herself so well that she wished she had that level of confidence right now. However, at the moment, she truly had no other option. Mito gasped as she gazed in disbelief at the shape of Uzumaki Kushina. Naruto noticed this and arched an eyebrow. "Mito, is there a problem?" causing her to give a small shake of her head before speaking with a broad smile. "No, nothing is wrong. This is just the young girl I mentioned to you." He looked slightly surprised and recognized the person in the photo. "You know the one in the picture," he said. Could this woman, who nearly resembled Mito, have been that active youngster? After listening to the discussion, Kushina spoke. Mito. S. Sama. Why are you here? I assumed you had passed away. She was shocked to see her ancestor, who should have been dead, in front of her. Mito nodded, but Naruto was the first to speak. I want to know why you called me mortal, Mito. You can tell me later. To which Kushina frowned as she recalled the precise reason she did. Namikaze managed to gain access to the Shoden's jutsu library and discovered a particular fuinjutsu that was once prohibited by the Uzumaki clan. Naruto scowled at how similar this situation was to the enslavement seal he had placed on me, while Mito gritted her teeth in rage at the thought of that cursed fuinjutsu. I understand. Could you tell me exactly when you learned about this? I assume it hasn't been too long because I can see you're pregnant. To which she grinned softly and rubbed her swollen belly, looking down at it from anger to pure love. This may have led to this, but I would love this child forever. I discovered this 2 weeks ago when I was completely depleted of chakra. During the day, my chakra was replenishing itself, and the seal appeared on me. After identifying it and locating the seals in Minato's room, I took the sole course of action to ensure that he was held accountable for his actions. Even with whatever the repercussions were for this. Caused Mito to look down pitifully, and Naruto's eyes took on a slightly solemn expression before focusing on the tiny bruise around her wrist. Mortal, where exactly did you get that bruise? He asked, staring at her wrist the entire time. Mito also scowled as he examined the wound, and Kushina glared at it. This caused Naruto to freeze in place before he clenched his fists and made them pop a little before he spoke. Namikaze. He tried to hurt me again, but I got away in time. But I did get this before I left. I see. I take it that you want these seals removed? She clenched her fists together and nodded instantly in response. Yes, and I want you to do one more thing for me. Kill Namikaze Minato. That's all I ask of you. Naruto simply nodded, his face slightly displaying his excitement at the prospect of killing this wretched piece of filth. However, Mito recalled those exact words because she had used them to have Hashirama killed and was aware of the consequences. The price wasn't bad, but it would be bad for Kushina. I see. Are you aware of the exchange's cost? To which she reluctantly nodded. She looked down at her swollen belly where her unborn daughter slept and said, yeah, when I use the summoning, my entrance to hell is assured, but, also, you are to take my soul in exchange for killing another human. Given that the woman must have recorded the rules for her to refer to in the future, Naruto nodded, realizing that she had learned this from Mito. Good you know then, Mito said before he spoke. Hold on, I'm asking you for something very important, Naruto. Sama. I know it's a lot, but will you please give her the option you gave me? Which caused Kushina to gaze at her inquisitively while Naruto scowled before closing his eyes in contemplation. This summoning had two sides, but was there another option? Well, that's up to her. If she agrees, I'll let it go. Mito smiled broadly, and Kushina cocked her head in perplexity. You. Anyo, may I ask what the second option is? She asked tremblingly. Naruto spoke after glancing at her out of the corner of his eye. It was the decision to become my slave and give up your humanity. It was the same one I gave Mito Uzumaki here. Kushina recoiled slightly at this, giving up her humanity. Getting enslaved? She didn't want to be a slave to an abusive person again after already being a tool for Konoha and a slave to Namikaze. Mito noticed her hesitation and glanced at Naruto with a hint of pleading in her eyes. Naruto moaned a little and then nodded. She approached the quivering figure of Kushina and knelt down in front of her, grinning gratefully. Kushi-chan, would you kindly look at me? Kushina gave her a questioning look as she gave her swollen belly a comforting hug. I understand that this decision might seem poor at first, but after you get to know him, Naruto. Sama turns out to be a wonderful person. The thought of giving up your humanity may also seem terrible, but I must say that it's better to be a demon than a human. She smiled cheekily. Before he spoke, Kushina blinked at her once, twice, and 3 times. Can Naruto really help me get rid of my nightmare? Can he free me from Namikaze's enslavement and give me the time I desire with my unborn child? If I can. That's all I really want. Mito simply gave a comforting smile before continuing. He can, of course. He did the same for me. In your opinion, how was that bastard Hashirama killed? She remarked humorously. Her eyes widened as she turned to face Naruto, who was staring at her with piercing purple eyes that seemed to be peering directly into her soul. Except Naruto. Sama, please get rid of my curse. Get rid of my enslavement and kill Namikaze Minato. was her final decision after much deliberation, screaming frantically in the hopes that this being, this devil, would assist her. After all these years, the pain erupted like a volcano inside her, before he said, "Very well then, the deal is struck. Now Mito, have her lay down where I can see the seal. If I'm guessing where it is, then she needs to lay down." Naruto's purple eyes briefly flared in anger at the sight of the woman in such a state. Mito nodded, helping Kushina get to her feet, and she lay down in confusion while Naruto kneeled next to her. "Isn't the seal on the seal that contains the Kyuubi?" She nodded after expressing surprise at how he knew. Mito then gradually raised her shirt just above her protruding belly. Since her pregnant belly was fully visible, Kushina blushed in embarrassment. After giving Mito a nod, Naruto put his hand on her swollen stomach and rubbed it gently while keeping his eyes closed in focus. His abrupt touch caused Kushina to blush, and she had to hold back a groan. He had such a gentle and soft touch. His hand on her belly made her feel warm and protected, and his commanding aura caused many people in the forest to completely leave the area they were in. It felt good. When she felt her unborn daughter's quick kicking inside her belly, her eyes widened. It seemed as though she shared her feelings and was thrilled by the touch, enjoying it just as much as she did. As Naruto felt the child kick at the spot where his hand would be, he stifled a tiny smile. The child was inside the woman's belly. Really, it was funny. To the child, it was like playing a game. Mentally getting ready to remove the seal, he shook his head. Mito smiled as she observed the exchange. Her master, who was unaware that he was a natural-born father, was irrelevant because, as she knew, children in the demon villages held him in high regard. Furthermore, Mito was convinced that her theory of Kushina's lord being a natural father was correct just by witnessing the way her unborn child responded to his touch. Or was it something else? Before he spoke, Naruto's hand began to glow purple. Hatsubai. Akuma no Yona Magiku. Demon Magic. Release. Before the purple aura left him and encased Kushina's belly enslavement seal. The seal also began to corrode, flaking off like dry paint before turning to dust in the wind, just like Mito. Kushina watched in awe as all of this happened, then her eyes began to well up with tears before she completely lost it and took action. When Kushina gave Naruto a fierce hug while sobbing and saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," Naruto was caught off guard. Since Naruto had never experienced this type of touch before, Mito noticed it and gently pulled Kushina away from him, hugging her as her master hurriedly got up, straightened his clothes, and then turned his head away to avoid them. Damn. What's wrong with me? I almost lose control of my emotions when the mortal woman hugs me. After a few minutes, Kushina finally relaxed enough to give the person who had greatly aided her a clear look. Kushina thanked Mito in silence while dabbing at her tears. Tell me where this mortal is, Kushina. Namikaze Minato's death is the second part of the agreement, and I have to keep my end of the bargain. He's where? In response, Kushina spoke rapidly. Naruto nodded before approaching her. He's at the training ground 7, which is a little ways from here and outside of Konoha mostly. He knelt down and did something that caused Kushina to yell in surprise and Mito to smile. Since Kushina was pregnant, Naruto gently carried her in a bridal carry because he didn't want to kill the child, despite his evil nature. Because her face was in his chest and she could feel his steely muscles through his fabric clothing, the pregnant woman's face looked like a blood-red tomato. When his protective side of his aura overcame her and Mito, she unconsciously cuddled a little more. At that, Naruto and Mito vanished in a burst of light. Then let us go see this, human. Ground of Training 7. Naruto and Mito appeared outside the training field, with Kushina tightly clutching his clothes, her face pressed against his chest, and her eyes closed. Mito thought this was pretty funny, but Naruto wasn't sure how to respond. He put her down and gently pried her off, then turned to face Mito. She nodded and, to Kushina's surprise, Mito's index finger began to glow purple before she rode in the air, creating what appeared to be a Fuinjutsu circle. I sense the mortal's signature. Place a barrier around here where no one will hear or see this battle. Also make it where no one else can get in, she said. Demon Fuinjutsu. Sound and sight time distortion barrier. Akuma Fuinjutsu. Sando Daisaito Jiken Yugami barrier. Before every tree surrounding the training grounds briefly glowed before going out of sight. Naruto nodded in agreement as he spoke. She nodded, and with some assistance from Naruto, Kushina was walking with Mito behind Naruto. Very good, Mito, now get Kushina and bring her with us. She must see this human's death to know he truly dies. However, it seemed as though everything was moving away from them along the route. Even the trees were bending in the opposite direction, and the animals were either running away or dying from proximity. Before Mito could detect her master's increasing demon bloodlust, the two Uzumakis blinked. She was also a little afraid because it was much scarier than anything she had seen in a long time. The two were unaware, however, that Naruto noticed numerous other bruises running down her arms when she was restrained to his body in addition to the one on her wrist. This led him to surmise that she was concealing a lot more bruises on her body. Even though he may be the devil, he could not forgive the act of abusing a woman who was carrying an unborn child. It was heinous, disgusting, and simply unforgivable. In his view, such an act carries a punishment of a straight shot to hell, with him serving as the harbinger of your descent into the brimstone realm of Makai. I'll show you what happens when you piss off a devil, Namikaze. The trees parted and the clouds themselves split apart as a result of Naruto's overwhelming demonic aura, allowing Mito, Kushina, and Naruto to enter through the foliage. There was nothing visible in Naruto's eyes when he looked at the spiky, blonde-haired human training away, and his face could only be described as stoic. Take Kushina, Mito, and keep a minimum of 25 feet away. As Mito sat down, Kushina followed, her gaze fixed on the scene where this Naruto was supposed to kill Minato. I don't know what would happen if Kushina or the unborn child is affected by my Yukai, so better safe than sorry, Mito said. She wanted to at least feel what was going to happen, which is why she was so anxious to see her child kick a little. After nodding in recognition of this, Naruto turned to face the human and proceeded toward him, the grass igniting with every step. Even the air was shifting wildly. When the tree sensed his demonic energy emanating from him, it died. In some way, Minato sensed this and spun around, but his eyes widened when he saw someone wearing a very odd outfit. The markings on his face and the crimson-red lines running down them made him feel a little uneasy, and it was his face that got him. The only time he tensed up was when he sensed the demonic energy emanating from the man. Who are you? To which Naruto simply continued to glare at him with such unholy rage that Minato seemed to freeze as his purple eyes seemed to tear right into his soul and petrify it. Mortal, I have been called upon to murder you. I will carry out my half of the agreement, Minato said, a little bewildered. What are you talking about? Wait. What deal? What call? Why would anyone want to murder me? His inquiries flow like a swiftly moving piston. Naruto simply continued to stare at him tonelessly, right into his soul. First of all, don't question me because I'll snap your neck to death. Secondly, I was offered a deal that would kill you, Namikaze Minato, in addition to getting rid of a few seals. Thirdly, you have no concern about that, and finally, Uzumaki Kushina wants you dead for what you have done to her. And personally I agree with her. Minato's azure blue eyes narrowed in rage as she heard the final statement. That bitch? She put you through this, huh? I suppose I'll have to correct her later. Hey buddy, you can leave now. After saying, I don't want to hurt you now, he stopped speaking and collapsed to his knees under the weight of the unbearable pressure. Sensing the strong, sinister aura emanating from the person in front of him, his tanned face rapidly turned pale. Naruto approached the trembling man slowly, taking one step at a time. It was funny that the man actually believed he could defeat him. Oh, human arrogance at its finest. However, he stated that he would not allow Kushina to pass away too soon, but rather would prolong his demise gradually. And the most excruciating this information caused Minato's eyes to widen, but before he could say anything, Naruto appeared directly in front of him, his fist already pierced his stomach. Mortal, you really are a stupid fool. To have beat a woman who is pregnant with that of an innocent soul, truly you are a despicable little man. But nevertheless I cannot abide my presence any longer. I will fulfill my bargain before I drag your pathetic soul into hell where you can be tortured along with your fellow Shoden. With a painful grunt, Minato shot across the training grounds, into a few trees, and then slammed into the barrier Mito put up, burning his back. Blood spurted from his clenched teeth. Ah! Before slamming Minato's head repeatedly into the barrier, causing his hair to catch fire and severely burning his head, he halted when Naruto's hand covered his mouth, stifling his screams. With Minato slamming into the ground and making a huge crater, he then appeared over his body and kneed him in the back after spin, kicking him back to the training fields. The barricaded area reverberated with the sound of bones breaking and a spine snapping in two. Ah! The Namikaze screamed. Yes, mortal, scream. Because your sins have a lot more to come. Did Minato suffer as a result? Grabbing him by the leg, Naruto swung him backwards and into the ground, causing a crater the size of a human. Without allowing Minato's pain to even register, he repeatedly swung back and forth, his blood splattering the ground and his grunts and screams of pain audible. Though he hasn't finished yet, Naruto lifted Minato off his leg to meet the man's gaze. When the man attempted to kick him off with his other leg, Minato grunted in frustration, but her weak attempt to escape Naruto's iron grip was thwarted by his iron grip. He muttered, pathetic mortal-esque rhyming around like a worm, and then threw the namikaze to the side, sending it into the ground and creating a trench before he threw it directly into the tree trunk. Despite the pain he was experiencing inside, Minato managed to get to his feet before he pulled out his Hiraishin kunai, which caused Naruto to raise an eyebrow. The devil then easily shifted his head slightly to the right, but he didn't even flinch when the man vanished in a yellow flash before he appeared behind him. Before he was launched into the air, Naruto's left arm was already in motion, backhanded the namikaze, and crushed his lower jaw. Before he emerged above Naruto with a whirling blue orb in his right hand, he disappeared in yet another yellow flash. Consider this Hiraishin Rasengan, level 2. Before he could see, Naruto's arm blurred faster than the onlookers could see and actually stopped the Rasengan with his palm. Minato shouted and thrust his attack downward. To his great surprise, the purple malevolent orbs of his mysterious attack slowly glanced upward, piercing right into his own eyes. Minato was shocked by this, but what stopped him cold upon first sight were Naruto's glaring purple eyes, which were so full of hate that he was unable to speak. "You think this is an attack?" He only uttered the words, "pitiful," before clenching his hand and sending the Rasengan flying. He then crushed Minato's hand, causing the wounded Namikaze's eyes to enlarge in agony. Finally, he was hauled down by his neck and slammed into the ground, his muffled screams resonating throughout the cramped, sealed training grounds. Kushina watched this entire event with Mito patting her head. It must have been satisfying to watch her most despised foe get beaten up like a rag doll. As Mito watched Naruto launch the namikaze into the air before slamming his head face first into the ground once more, creating another crater, she muttered, "Naruto Sama, he is quite angry." Before grabbing the man by what hair remained on his head and ripping it off his scalp entirely, he may have broken numerous bones in his face. As Minato was being thrashed like the jerk he was, Kushina muttered, her eyes shining with joy, "Yeah. I can see why you like him. He's very protective of women. From what I can see." In a way, it was funny to watch the one person she had long wished dead scream like a child when his arm was broken in the other direction and pulled out of its socket. "I agree, and I'll be honest with you. When you first meet Naruto Sama, he might be blatantly evil. You will eventually understand why I enjoy being his slave, but he is the coldest person you will ever encounter." With his feet hanging above the ground, Naruto grasped the namikaze by the throat. His body had been beaten and fractured beyond repair. He had a bloody smear all over his face, and his nose was broken and twisted beyond repair. His teeth nearly broke all 4 of his limbs, leaving all the bones fragmented and embedded in the inner muscles of his limbs. When Naruto heard the mortal whimper, his scream was cut off when he tore out his tongue, and he gave a little icy smirk. When he saw the fear in his eyes, his smirk became even more vicious. "Don't think we're done yet, mortal." When he grasped his broken and battered arm, it became even more intense. After saying, "Your torture is far from done," Naruto proceeded to slowly tear Minato's right arm away from his shoulder. As the tortured person whimpered even louder in agony, blood spurted out like a geyser. With blood all over his face, the other Naruto looked even more twisted than he already was, and it was quite the sight to grasp his icy expression. Then the left arm was torn from the shoulder, causing blood to flow out at the same rate. "Here goes another one." Then, much to Minato's excruciating, never-ending agony, he grabbed both legs. Before speaking, he tore them from his pelvis. "Now, choke on your own flesh and blood and die." Slowly, Naruto then grabbed arms and slammed them through Minato's mouth and back through his head after slamming both of the severed legs through his stomach and chest. In just a few seconds of twitching, his body went limp. His voice returned to its usual tone as he said, "Meh. Pathetic mortal. Deserved every bit of pain he got." At that moment, he saw Minato's soul emerge from his lifeless, bloody body, but he grabbed it, causing its eyes to widen in terror. Naruto slammed his other hand to the ground and said, "Oh, you're not going anywhere. You're going to hell, where you belong." A human-sized dark portal appeared in Akuma no Yona Magiku, Jigoku no Doreguchin, Demon Magic, Dragging Chain of Hell, and a red spiked chain erupted before snagging Minato's soul. Before slowly retreating to the portal, it writhed around his soul, tearing and damaging it while screaming in agony. When Minato's soul realized this, it attempted to vehemently retreat, but was thwarted by a last tug. Minato's wailing soul was drawn directly into hell through the abyssal portal, where it would endure eternal agony. Naruto turned to Minato's body and lifted his hand, sighing. After saying, Akuma no Yona Magiku. Shinshoku, Demon Magic. Erode, a green aura left Naruto's hand and slowly made its way to Minato's tortured and dead body, where it was engulfed by the greenish aura before his body began to smoke. Knowing that this was the same method he used to murder Hashirama, Mito smiled. Kushina continued to gaze in awe at how Naruto was acting. Without even attempting to kill Minato, this demon from hell took pleasure in torturing and killing him. With wide eyes, she watched as Minato's body began to emit a toxic looking smoke, then his flesh began to burn from the inside out before melting out, along with his eyes, until everything turned to a green liquid, leaving only his skeleton. Naruto halted the technique and turned to face Kushina and Mito before approaching them. He noticed her eyes widen a little, but Mito's assurance helped her feel a little more at ease. Okay, it's finished now, Kushina, it's time I marked you. Naruto knelt down and touched her shoulder with his index finger before it ignited in the purple aura. He carefully lowered her shirt a little to show off her flawless skin. As a result, she blushed, just like Mito did. Naruto dragged his finger over her shoulder while Mito cooed, "This will hurt a bit, Kushi-chan, just bear with it." When Kushina felt Naruto's finger dragging hotly across her shoulder, she let out a painful whimper. However, she paused briefly to glance over her shoulder and see Slave of Hellwing Naruto. As Kushina watched the mark vanish into her skin, she thought to herself, Hellwing Naruto has a very good ring to it. Now, Kushina, when your death is imminent, Mito and I will return. She nodded and then got to her feet, grinning at Kushina. When you die, I will drag your soul with me to hell until then. Enjoy your life as a human. Mito, let's go. While Kushina watched them leave, she felt compelled to tell Naruto to wait for something. She was unaware of its nature, but she wished him to remain. Hold on, she yelled, causing them to both halt. Naruto glanced over his shoulder, raising an eyebrow in inquiry. Yes? She approached him slowly before bowing her head in response. Naruto. Sama, could you kindly do me a favor? Would you mind staying here? Just for a short time? She said, her face slightly flushed from his question. Mito arched an eyebrow in interest, and Naruto stared at her intently before closing his eyes to reflect. After a few seconds, he opened them to talk. Lucifer won't be moving again for a while, so we'll stay for 2 days, but that's about it. We must return later. Kushina smiled broadly in response, and Mito gave her master a grateful glance. Thank you. And Naruto. Sama, she said respectfully, her head lowered. Naruto gave a nod before continuing. Mito and Kushina, who was accustomed to sleeping in the woods, nodded in agreement with the statement, "We shall stay though out of Konoha. I cannot bear being near any of those other mortals. So we shall be staying in the forest." A visible white crack appeared before it broke like glass as Naruto slammed his hand into the barrier Mito had created and gripped it. After saying, "Then let us go then." Naruto leapt off, Mito holding Kushina in her arms. They all leapt into the woods to avoid any onlookers. The area would undoubtedly be overrun with Konoha shinobi in a matter of minutes. The Death Forest descending into the woods, where they initially encountered Kushina. Naruto approached the largest tree, which had the broadest trunk. Before he nodded in what appeared to be approval, his hand struck it several times. What is he doing? Incredulous at what Naruto was doing, Kushina uttered those words. Mito simply grinned at her response. Before she could say anything more, she heard, "Making our home for the next 2 days." Wham! She glanced back just in time to see, to her surprise, a 20-foot hole in the tree with smoke rising from Naruto's knuckles. A single, purposeful piece of the tree lay on the ground in front of him. "We'll be staying here for the next 2 days. We depart after that." Mito nodded as Kushina spoke. He simply nodded in response to the words, "Thank you for doing this, Naruto. Sama," and then followed him inside the tree. Then, with a snap of his fingers, the same barrier Mito had created appeared over the hole he had made in the tree. Naruto then moved to the darker area of the tree, sat on the ground, leaned against it, and closed his eyes. "To make sure we aren't found, can't have Kami's forces onto us. Now I'm gonna go take a nap," he said. After watching this, the two turned to face one another and said, "Sue, want to tell me about your life as his slave Mito?" Sama, curious about what her next life would hold, Kushina asked. Mito simply grinned and told her about her ordeal during her time in hell. After 2 days, the majority of what transpired, from the moment she called Naruto to the moment she passed away and had her body taken with her to become a demon, was explained by Mito. She told Kushina everything that had happened to her during Naruto's training. Kushina thought everything she told her was a fairy tale. She sat in her lap and listened to her the entire time, just as she had when she was a child and heard her other stories. Even so, when Naruto was brought up and it was explained how he defended her from the demons that swarmed to her and how he battled legions upon legions of demons, the baby inside of her kicked a few times. He killed another demon titan, Gilgamesh, in less than 3 minutes flat, or he batted them away like flies. She was incredibly intrigued by the life that lay ahead of her, and she was even more so when Akemi assured her that it would undoubtedly be a wonderful one. Additionally, Kushina described to her how she fled Uzu no Kuni during its attack and grew up in Konoha. Then she told her that Konoha had been pleased to have her as a shinobi. Mito was also delighted when Kushina informed her that Konoha had practically studied after learning the precise cause of their Shodem's death. In addition to telling her how the Kyuubi had gotten along with her over the years, she also described how Konoha had been attempting to use her in order to obtain the Uzumaki Fuinjutsu from her because they were unable to obtain it from Mito because her body had been destroyed after her death. It would be equivalent to claiming Lucifer had a minor power complex to say Mito was angry. Despite her intense anger, she prevented her master from sensing her demon aura. She didn't want a small emotional outburst to wake him up. Regretfully, the two were unaware that Naruto had heard everything and that his hatred of people in general had increased. Naruto woke up from his slumber and turned to see Kushina and Mito dozing against the tree's inner trunk. Kushina was leaning against Mito, her arms encircling her swollen abdomen. In contrast, Mito had protectively wrapped her arms around Kushina. When Naruto saw this, he turned away and proceeded to the hole he had made in the tree. His eyes were focused on the sky, and he glared at it, seeing faint moving dots in the distance. He scowled at this before hearing something. Turning to face the two sleeping women, he saw Kushina stretching her arms out and letting out a loud cry while Mito rubbed her eyes with her kimono. Yawn, Kushina groaned and opened her eyes a little to see Mito also waking up. As she looked around the room, she felt her breath catch in her throat and saw Naruto's purple eyes staring directly into her soul. As the unborn child kicked a few more times, she felt his intense gaze and looked down at her swollen belly as a pink hue rose to her face. He approached the two and knelt down in front of them, saying, "Mito, it's time we left. I sense Kami's forces searching the area." In some way, Kushina's eyes took on a dejected expression, but she quickly removed it. Knowing that she would have to spend some time away from Kushina, Mito simply nodded her head and smiled a little. He nodded and then snapped his fingers, shattering the barrier like a broken mirror and revealing the forest outside. "Yes, Naruto. Sama, I'm ready to leave." "All right, let's go now." He felt a hand grab his wrist, and as he slowly looked down, he saw Kushina staring down with her other trembling hand on her swollen belly. Naruto. Sama, would you please put your hand on my stomach once more before you leave? I'm sure the baby would like to feel it again, she said slowly so as not to aggravate Naruto in the least. Knowing that Mito wanted him to accept, Naruto kept his eyes on her form before averting them to meet her beseeching eyes. With a slight sigh, he knelt. "Very well then. Lay down," she said, beaming broadly as Naruto reached up to the underside of her shirt and pulled it up over her swollen belly, revealing it once more. Naruto closed his eyes and placed his hand over the pregnant belly, feeling the baby kick violently at his touch once more. He gave his lip a tiny twitch and then began gently massaging her belly to increase the baby's kicking motion. He never noticed Kushina's intense red face or the expression in her eyes as she gazed at his form, wishing he would stay a little while longer. Mito was the only one who noticed this. Mito assisted her in standing up, and she looked at Naruto with gratitude in her eyes after he withdrew his hand and pulled her shirt back down. He simply waved it away and turned his head away when I said, "Thank you for doing that, Naruto. Sama. I hope I haven't made you angry." With that, his slave nodded, smiled at her, and walked away with her master into the dark, swirling portal back to hell, where they waited for the time to die. "It is of no concern, though. We must leave. Mito, let us go." With a gentle smile on her face, Kushina watched them leave while rubbing her stomach again and focusing more on Naruto's retreating back. Naruto. Sama is exactly as Mito described him. He may be a little difficult to understand, but I sense a little tenderness in him somewhere. At her thought, she felt her baby kick once more. She grinned as she looked down. "You enjoy Naruto's touch, don't you?" She would have seen armored figures with spears in their hands and white wings on their backs if she had peered up into the skies above the forest. The entity behind him was said to be countless of the same angelic-looking soldiers. "We lost the unholy being. He has left back to hell. We must report back to Kami. Sama." With frowns on their faces and weapons in their hands, they all appear to be floating above the scene. Hell as the portal closed behind them, Naruto and Mito dropped back to Hell and looked around, observing that Lil had changed. Mito accompanied Naruto as he made his way back to his house. "Would you mind telling me which of Kami's forces was present, Naruto? Sama?" To which Naruto glanced at her from the side while continuing to move. It was Kami's personal guardsmen, soldiers that Kami had personally trained. The Crusader Legion, or Jujigen no Guntai, is far more powerful than the demon legions in this hell, and you couldn't have defeated them with your current strength. Since I've been here for a lot longer than that force was even established, I can take them without a doubt. The power I possess is far greater than theirs. He said, "Now we have to leave. You have to return to your training." Mito nodded in agreement as he considered this heavenly force. The court of Kami in heaven, many voices could be heard shouting in Kami's court. Male.to. Female outrages and angry voices were directed at a single entity. A woman with a goddess-like body. It was meant to make any straight or gay man straight as a board, make all women envious, or cause a lesbian to die of nosebleeds. Even in the white court, her long, flowing silver hair seemed to glow. She had golden eyes that seemed to radiate strength and wisdom from within, along with a hint of annoyance. Her skin was a pale porcelain that begged to be touched because it felt so soft and creamy to the touch. At the end of her white kimono were silver treads. Kami, the ruler of heaven and the oldest and strongest of her fellow deities, wore simple wooden sandals and a black sash around her waist. Designs of flowers danced across her attire. Her sister Megami, goddess over death, was standing next to her. Aside from a few distinguishing features, she resembled her. Her skin was the same as Kami's, but slightly paler. Her fingernails were sharp, and her hair was a blend of white and purple. Her eyes were the same golden amber as her sister's, and her face was framed by two bangs. Despite having a more stern appearance, her face was entirely heart-shaped. She was dressed modestly but elegantly in a very royal, revealing black kimono. It only revealed a good portion of her legs and cleavage. A purple obi around her waist held the kimono tight in a lovely knot behind her as it flowed with her. As the court was crowded with their fellow gods and goddesses shouting and screaming over what had been happening, Kami's and Megami's delicate eyebrows were currently twitching in frustration. Lucifer led her forces in their attacks against Yami, their other fellow god, and hell had been all but pleasant ever since Lucifer had defected from Yami. He was merely sitting quietly and amusedly observing the scene. Additionally, there were the cries of a specific demon in hell. This demon was Hellwing Naruto, the devil who was said to possess the same power as Lucifer and who rocked hell to its foundation. Even Lucifer and Yami have been affected by his actions, and many of their fellow gods believe that he should be killed before he gains too much strength. To be honest, they assumed that some people were afraid because Naruto was rumored to have defeated Gilgamesh for merely bothering him in less than 3 minutes. Kami. Sama. When she heard her name, she turned to see her Crusader Legion entering with anxious expressions as the doors slammed open. "Yes, tell me what you need to report." No one could match the authority in her voice. The Crusader Legion was the center of attention, and even Yami was observing them with interest. As Kami's eyes widened, the words, "We've returned, and what we have seen is not good. For the Chosen One's mother has made a deal with a demon." Caused all noise to cease. Did the mother of her Chosen One make a bargain with a demon? Has she passed away? Was she killed by the demon? Is the fetus doing okay? What took place? The power in her voice caused many of her fellow deities to shudder as she asked in a commanding tone. Many people snarled at the enslavement seals when they said, "It happened 2 days ago." Uzumaki Kushina, she made a deal to have her enslavement seals taken off her and to have Namikaze Minato killed. Primarily the court's female members. When those seals were brought up, Kami and her sister frowned. "I see. Who was the demon she called upon?" This caused them to shift uncomfortably, which many people noticed. Amaterasu spoke, irritated. "Who was it?" To which the captain of the Crusader Legion replied. "It was Naruto, the demon titan devil from hell, Hellwing Naruto," he concluded before collapsing to the ground again. At one point, the name of that particular devil was mentioned. Even Kami and Megami were taken aback by the amount of murderous intent that Yami revealed. "Did you just mention the name of Hellwing? Was he present all this time? And with, of all people, the mother of the Chosen Ones?" His divine voice caused the Legion to shudder under his influence. When Kami saw this, she quickly flared her power, making Yami's power seem insignificant. "That's sufficient. Tell me how long he was there, Captain." Yami, please sit down and relax. She spoke in a gentle, compassionate tone. Under their master's voice, the Legion completely relaxed. Not mentioning that she asked them to stay a little longer, Susano narrowed his eyes suspiciously. He was there with her for 2 days. He and his unholy slave Uzumaki Mito stayed with Kushina. Kushina spent 2 days with that demon. Is she okay? Amatsu. Mikaboshi said, and one of the Legion nodded in agreement. Kami spoke after taking everything in stride. They nodded before returning through the doors. I see. Thank you for reporting this to me. Go back out there and keep watch. I want Hellwing watched when he comes back to Ningenkai. They said. However, nobody noticed the faint hesitancy in Kami and Megami's eyes as they were sent off. However, nobody could have predicted what would transpire in the ensuing years. Hell, 3 years later, 100 years have passed since Kushina called Naruto and Mito, after which she made a deal with Naruto and he marked her as a slave. Naruto made Mito return to training after they left Ningenkai because she needed it so that she would be prepared if they were attacked there again. Naturally, he made up for the time he had lost in Hell by angering Lucifer by destroying 10 of his legions upon his return, demonstrating his return. As a result, he continued his daily routine of murdering more of Lucifer's men, with occasional assistance from Yami's own forces, only to be totally destroyed. As many of the demons who knew Naruto and Mito from their kinder deeds of aiding their towns waved at them, Naruto abruptly stopped and looked up as though he was staring at nothing. At the moment, Naruto and Mito were enjoying a walk through Hell. When Mito noticed this, he said, "Is something amiss with Naruto? Sama?" Before he spoke, he simply continued to look up. This caused her eyes to widen in horror. It is near, it would seem Kushina isn't as lucky as you were, Mito. Kushina's death is coming. She spoke as she turned to face her master. W. What? No Uzumaki woman has ever experienced such a fate because our bodies are too strong to be drained from such a thing. Plus with Kushina's special chakra. However, Wait. Her due date is soon. Oh no. She'll die by childbirth. Naruto nodded slightly at this. The only thing I know is that her time is coming, Mito said, slowly turning to face him. I don't know how she would die because that is only known by the goddess of death Megami and Kami. Many people wouldn't hear her, but Naruto did. Naruto turned to face her and gave her his undivided attention. Naruto. Sama. There's something I have to ask of you. Yes? She lowered her head, her hair casting a shadow over her eyes. Is there anything that you can do? Save her. I mean, stop Kushina's death where she could spend some time with her child. A week at least. Mito asked with such nervousness in her voice, and Naruto wasn't surprised, but Mito snapped her head at him when he said, I can't, or won't, knowing that there were moments when Naruto was extremely icy and demonstrated that he was a real devil. Her voice trembled. I can't for 2 reasons, Naruto said, ignoring the remark. First, from a business standpoint, it would be seen as my fault for delaying the completion of the deal by giving her more time to live. To be honest, I owe her absolutely nothing for this. Although it may seem harsh, particularly in this kind of circumstance, I have to do my share as she does hers. This is the nature of demon-human interactions. The second reason is that, according to ancient law, I cannot stop her from dying. Otherwise, the penalty for doing so is very high. His tone was more solemn than she had ever seen. With trepidation, Mito said, What is this punishment? She shivered as Naruto spoke to her in the most solemn tone, sending a shiver down her spine. He declared, total soul obliteration, because, despite his devilish nature, he would never tell his slave lies. Knowing that Naruto wouldn't violate such a law and have his soul destroyed, Mito stood there, her eyes wide with fear at what she had just heard, and then she hung her head low. Now let's go, Mito. Naruto then opened a portal and entered, with Mito trailing behind him. Hello, no Kuni. Beyond the ceiling chamber as Naruto and Mito emerged from the portal, they saw a big rock formation with numerous Konoha shinobi manning the entrance and making their way to the chamber's side. Along with Kyuubi's chaotic Yukai, Naruto sensed Kushina energy within himself. We can't enter, so we'll watch, he said, gathering Yukai in his hand before continuing. Akuma no Yona Magiku. Hyoji Mira, Demon Magic. Viewing mirror. Is said as Naruto repeatedly swipes his hand, causing a tiny, dark mirror to appear that depicts what is going on inside. Mito muttered, I see, she's already in labor, and Naruto nodded. They watched as Hiruzen controlled Kyuubi with his hand over the seal while his wife, Bawako, gave birth. They observed the numerous Anbu securing the chamber's exterior and interior. Even they could hear Kushina's cries as she pushed her child out. "Ahhhnn," she yelled as Bawako caught a glimpse of the crown. "Kushina, give it one more push." After hearing this, Bawako pulled Kushina out, using all of her strength to force her unborn daughter to emerge before the umbilical cord is cut. After cleaning and wrapping her, Bawako showed Kushina Naruki's sleeping, whiskered face, and Kushina grinned broadly at her daughter. Seeing the tuft of blonde hair with red highlights in full view, she exclaimed, "She's so cute." When Mito saw Kushina's daughter being born, he grinned broadly. Given that there are so few Uzumakis left in the world, it is always wonderful to see another one born. Naruto himself watched the scene with a faint, but barely perceptible, smile on his face. He turned to see a cloaked, masked figure murdering the Anbu guard before entering the room. When Mito saw him come in, he witnessed the man killing Bawako and then grabbing the child. Before the masked man threw the infant into the air, they witnessed the two arguing about a pointless matter. "Oh no." Naruto prepared a shadow spell just in case, Mito gasped. "Naruki." Despite his advanced age, Kushina sobbed in front of Hiruzen, who arrived at the infant just in time to hear the man's cry. His eyes widened before he removed the cover that was wrapped around Naruki to reveal active explosive tags. "I hope you can get rid of the explosive tags," he said. At this, Naruto squinted, but Hiruzen managed to remove them just before they exploded. Before warping away in what Naruto knew as Kamui, the cloaked man reached Kushina. "Well, let's go, Mito. You have to watch out for Kushina until she passes away." With that, they both vanished into the portal after Kushina signed, and Hiruzen quietly left the room. They followed the man in the cloak and discovered him with Kyuubi emerging from her seal and Kushina chained up by two broken pillars. "Now, Kyuubi, you must destroy your old container." Akemi aimed her claw directly at Kushina in an attempt to genjutsu. Induced resistance. Mito let out a gasp and attempted to interrupt, but Naruto intervened. "Naruto. Sama. We can't just say, and have him shake his head because he wasn't being casual. You still haven't noticed?" She turned to face him, blinking. "What are you?" But as soon as she sensed the various energies in the sky, her eyes widened. She looked up to see the Crusader Legion, or Jujigen no Guntai, staring down at them from above. Angels," Naruto said, nodding. "Yes, they have been here before we have. And they are here to prevent us from interfering. Even though I could beat them all because they are no match for me, their goal is to delay us both." Mito managed a tense nod while glaring at the angels above her. As the scene played out in front of them all, Mito sagged as she saw Kushina vanish in a flash of yellow just as Kyuubi was ready to pierce her. "I didn't know she knew how to use that bastard's jutsu," Mito blinked. Naruto simply nodded as he watched the cloaked man wave off her disappearance before following his lead in her genjutsu-crazed state to Konoha Kyuubi. Indeed, it was an altered version intended for one-time use. They all watched as Hiruzen prepared something that only Naruto knew, and Kyuubi was successfully pushed back using giant summons. Because he knew what the man was going to do, he narrowed his eyes in frustration. On the battlefield, Sarutobi was by himself with Kyuubi when he gave the order for all of his men to return, but before he could act, chains covered in chakra sprang from the earth, encircling Kyuubi's body before slamming it to the ground with its snout and all of its chains down. Hiruzen watched in disbelief as Kushina coughed up blood on the ground. "Hurry up and get out of here. I'll take the Kyuubi down with me," she said, looking at Hiruzen through weary eyes, but Hiruzen shook his head. She scowled and said, "That is not possible, Kushina. We both know you're barely holding those chains and, in addition, you're almost dead. The only way to stop the Kyuubi from killing us all is to seal it away." "Seal? What are you?" Only for her eyes to enlarge, now that she knew exactly what he meant. Despite her fatigue, she got to her feet and clenched her fists, shouting, "No, I won't let you," before collapsing to her knees and coughing up more blood. The group became tense as Mito started crying upon seeing her, while Naruto simply glared at the angels above him. "No. Not her. I will not allow you," Kushina said, her eyes burning with hatred as she glared defiantly at Hiruzen, but the man simply shook his head. As he got the sealing ready, he said, "No, Kushina, only an Uzumaki can hold the Kyuubi at bay. And you're almost dead. This is the only way. I will not permit it." With a shout, she released the Hachiman Tonku, the 8 celestial chakra gates, causing her chakra to leap, startling Kyuubi and Hiruzen. Mito started crying because she knew what would happen if she did this, and Naruto's eyes widened a little too. Kushina used the enormous chakra she had acquired to pull the chains down, causing the Kyuubi to crash into the ground. Then, she began tugging on it, causing the Kyuubi to drag itself to her, where her original seal was. When she realized the limitations of using the gates and felt her aura waning, Kyuubi seized the opportunity to attack Hiruzen. Hiruzen summoned the cradle, set Naruki inside, and then looked up to see Kyuubi's enormous claw approaching. With her remaining strength, Kushina leapt in front of the attack and was impaled by Akemi's claw. Naruto closed his eyes, and Mito's eyes grew wide. Hiruzen slammed his hands on the ground and performed the necessary hand seals while ignoring the baby's cries after noticing that Kushina was motionless. Shiki Fujin. Forbidden Fuinjutsu. Dead demon consuming seal. At that point, Megami's apparition materialized in her Shinigami form, as modern humans refer to it. They all watched as Hiruzen had Megami sacrifice Kyuubi's soul to her by sealing him into the blonde infant. Megami ate Hiruzen's soul after tearing it from his body. When Naruto noticed Kushina's soul emerging, he took it as a cue and materialized directly in front of Megami, removing Kushina's soul. As her soul began to take shape, Kushina noticed Naruto staring down at her. She grinned and said, "Naruto. Sama. Naruki-chan." Naruto then sealed Kushina's body away. Megami grinned as she watched this. Naruto simply looked at her and said, "It's good to know that you follow the rules unlike your fellow demons, Hellwing." Given that her master silenced the deity to a great extent, Megami scowled and Mito grinned. True, it's also good to know that you deities can be much more evil than us demons. To make her death like this. The Crusader Legion's captain was scowling at the sight of the Chosen One's mother in a demon's grasp. He was now instructed to refrain from interfering with anything that adheres to the ancient laws, but he couldn't allow this unholy thing to condemn the mother of the Chosen One to hell. Hellwing. Just stop there. While Naruto simply spoke his back to them, Megami gave them a curious sidelong glance as the captain declared that his men were all prepared for what their captain was about to do. Huh? What is it? Mito glanced between her master and the frowning Legion captain, saying, "I have a deal to keep here. The problem is that we can't let you take her soul to hell. We will not allow you to corrupt her in the same way that you have corrupted Uzumaki Mito." This caused Mito to frown in frustration. This caught Naruto's attention. Did they not realize that it was against Kami's laws to obstruct a demon? Human deal? And no less in front of Megami? What a pathetic. You believe you can stop me? You witnessed this, Megami. They attempted to halt the transaction, but now they will pay. Megami simply nodded slowly, acknowledging that they had indeed broken one of Kami's laws. Even so, her gaze remained fixed on Naruto's form, whose body was now engulfed in hellfire. With that, Naruto's entire form was consumed by the flames of hell that circled his body. Mito, watch carefully. This is the first time I've shown you my transformation. Burn this in your mind. This is the power of a devil. The fact that their target was changing made the Crusader Legion tense. They had all heard tales, myths, and rumors about Hellwing's metamorphosis. But they were so terrified by what they saw. Mito was in complete and utter awe, while Megami's eyes were wide with shock that Naruto's power was greater than Lucifer's. Because a 7-foot tall, black, armored figure stood in front of them all. His entire body was clad in demonic armor. Spikes protruded from his shoulders, his purple demonic eyes emanating from the demonic-looking knight's black spiked helmet. His hands were now gauntlets, and all of his fingers were obscured by razor-sharp metal ones. His 2 black wings, which were 10 feet long, spread wide as they could to reveal who he was. The crimson spikes that ran along the back of his devilish 5-foot tail protruded from his backbone. His metal armor was covered in demonic runes across the entire surface. On his armor and the ground he stood on, the flames of hell danced. Like a leaking dam on the verge of collapsing, his Yukai and power poured out of him. The legion of Crusaders was shivering with pure, unadulterated terror and fear. The stories, myths, and rumors did this no justice. They were more terrified of this person than Yami was. Pay the price now for disobeying the law and annoying me. They all watched as the flame formed into a 6-foot katana, with the blade being entirely black and containing red demonic crimson runes. With that, flames sprouted from Naruto's hand before it took shape. With the guard shaped like a demon's maw and its mouth wide open, the handle is made of pure blood red crimson. A tiny piece of black chain was hanging at the end. Meet Apocalypse, then perish. With that, Naruto moved into the center of the Crusader Legion before Mito or the Legion could notice him. As 4 of the soldiers fell to the ground, their heads and wings were severed. Naruto turned around as he saw the approaching enemy and laughed as he quickly slammed his hand into the face of an approaching soldier. "Eat this, hee. Biguban no Yamiwa, Farashu, Big Bang Darkness Flash." Before the angel's eyes widened in horror and a darkness surrounded Naruto's hand. A moment later, a wave of compressed darkness destroyed that angel and half of the Crusader Legion, tearing them apart and disenergizing them all. Megami watched in disbelief as the attack split the clouds. A god would have suffered a severe blow from that attack alone. Mito saw her master use a single blow to destroy half of Kami's personal forces. As she permanently etched her master's devil form in her mind, her eyes were filled with wonder. It was like witnessing the very personification of power. She felt as though she was in a sea of yokai because of how powerful he was. Naruto's power was a veritable maelstrom that was getting stronger every day. This unholy creature had just killed half of his men, and the captain watched in horror. And with just one assault, in order to avoid losing more men, he had to order the retreat, but when he saw Naruto in his devil form, a fierce hatred flared in his eyes. Regarding him, he appeared to be a grim reaper pursuing its next victim as flames of hell burned all around him. When he looked at his Nodaichi flames set with the fires of hell, his purple eyes glowed murderously. With no other option, retreat, return to heaven, which they did, but before the others fled through the portal, Naruto hunted down and killed a few of them. When Naruto saw that they were gone, he flew back down to Mito, causing her to feel extremely dizzy. Megami simply gave him a questioning glance before disappearing through a portal as Naruto's evil eyes met hers. "Mito, it's time to leave. I'm tired of this place." His voice returned to normal, and his body transformed back into its typical shape. Mito simply nodded stupidly, still in disbelief at witnessing her master change and engage in such combat. Yes, Naruto. Sama, Mito said, giving Naruki one last look before following her master through the portal. Even so, none of them witnessed Senju Tsunade, the blonde pig-tailed Sennin, approach Naruki with a look of annoyance and arrogance in her eyes. Hell, when they first met Kushina, Naruto pulled out her soul and watched it transform into her form after reaching Hell. Then, before beginning the same rite he performed for Mito, Naruto opened her body. Because her soul was still developing, Kushina was too preoccupied with admiring her surroundings to participate in Naruto's fight against the Crusader Legion. "Kushina!" she exclaimed, startled, as she saw her new master staring at her while a huge blood circle stood in front of him, her body on the circle with odd symbols pointing straight at it. Yes? She uttered those words, and Naruto looked back at the circle. She looked a little perplexed, but Mito nodded, saying she would understand later. "This is the next part. When sacrificing your humanity, I'm going to be merging you and your body together and letting the yokai from me gather into your body, transforming you into a demon, or more specifically a devil." "All right, I get it," Naruto said, nodding before starting the ceremony. He repeated the process with Mito, but since she was only a few months older than when they first met, he didn't have to rejuvenate her body to its youthful state. However, he had to recover from the extreme exhaustion and pregnancy. As a result, Kushina didn't really change when the similar flash of light came. She wore a crimson-red kimono with black trim around the edges, and like Mito, her bust grew from a C-cup to a D-cup. She looked flawless with every curve on her body as her goddess-like figure grew even more slender. Her violet eyes remained the same, but they were darker, which set them apart from other things. However, the yokai coursing through her indicated that, like Mito, she was now a devil. "Whoa, I feel different, but I don't look it." Mito simply smiled because she had just said the same thing. "Don't worry, you've just turned into a devil like Mito and I are. I'll train you, and Mito will assist you while she trains herself if I'm not around." As I mentioned to her, "Kushina, I will not tolerate a helpless slave, and I want you to be capable of self-defense if and when the time comes." In response, she nodded and smiled slightly. "So, be ready for your training coming soon." Naruto and his lovely slaves would have a very busy few years as a result. If only they would create the figurative typhoon that would rock the 3 realms' very foundations. The Court of Heaven. Kami, so, you're telling me that you attacked Hellwing Naruto for fulfilling his end of the bargain and ignored the rules? Half of the Crusader Legion was destroyed as a result of what you so blatantly did in front of my own sister. Captain, is that what you're telling me? Kami's words were sharp enough to freeze the sun and pierce the hardest metal. Her eyes were glaring down at the force's commander, who was currently trembling in fear. Megami, along with several other gods and goddesses, watched from the sidelines with a grim expression. The captain said, "Yes, Kami. Sama," as if he had done nothing wrong because he was attempting to free the mother of the chosen ones from the unholy clutches of that monster. "I see. Are you a Dumbone?" Each of her words had enough divine power to shake the court, turn the powerful Crusader Legion into a shivering, whimpering mess, and make her fellow gods shudder. Her face was twisted into a frown at the idiots in front of her, and her eyes were glowing with an angry expression inside. Kami. Sama, was what the frightened captain said. "You violated, disregarded, and defiled my laws, the ones I established before you were even born. And you want to be punished for breaking the law? You're a fool. When you and your legion attempted to break the deal, Hellwing had every right to retaliate. By now, you should be aware that agreements made between humans and demons are final. Regardless of who they are. The ancient rule was never to be broken, but you did it with such reckless abandon." The captain and the rest of the legion were shocked by what she said. Kami sighed and then sat up straight, her eyes turning stony. She had already heard about her guardsmen's actions and was furious that they had all but violated her laws by attacking Hellwing. The statements made by her sister at the time had essentially confirmed the choice she was going to make. But Kami. Sama, he said, but Kami's glare was enough to silence him as she practically slammed him to the ground. "No buts. I have decided your punishment." Unlike her sister, who already knew what she was going to decree, this caused many other deities to raise their eyebrows. However, the Legion felt perplexed. Punishment? For a behavior they believed to be justified, why were they being punished? What? Penalties? Almost as fast as he spoke, the captain regretted what he had said. "Your punishment, which is second only to death, is to have you and your men stripped of your title and rank and exiled from the castle, where you will spend the rest of your lives in isolation and confess your transgressions against me." Kami simply raised her hand and, with a slight twitch of her finger, she caused the naive captain of the Crusaders to be flung her way by an unseen force before he was seen floating directly in front of her. "And to make sure you fools never try this again, I will make an example out of you since your punishment is close to heresy. I will treat you as such." He was shocked, but as Kami's words seemed to make everyone in the room tense, fear took its place as her icy, unforgiving eyes pierced through him. Before speaking, she raised her hand and pointed her index finger between the captain's eyes. White energy gradually covered the tip of her finger before she spoke, her azure, icy eyes piercing the man's. "For your disobedience, I will deliver your punishment myself and teach you what happens when you disobey my ALWS. Kami. S.Sam.N.N.N.No, please." The man begged and pleaded but was ignored entirely as she without hesitation stabbed her fingear right into his temple, not enough to pierce it, but enough for her energy to burn through his flesh and bone to mark him. She dragged her finger slowly, ignoring his excruciating screams, across the man's forehead, leaving a scorched line mark. She then continued down the left side of his face, ending at his left eye, where she brutally inserted her energy-coated finger, crushing and burning it away, melting it inside his eye socket. Ignoring his cries, Kami coldly took the captain by the head and threw him into his terrified legion, sending them crashing to the ground. Everyone was still stunned by what they saw, though, and it was a rare occurrence for Kami to administer such a severe punishment. It also served as a reminder that crossing Kami was the last thing any god or goddess ever dared to do because it would cause this or worse. All they could do was observe her return to her seat and beckon the legion out in a toneless and frigid manner. "Now. Avoid my sight." The stunned legion was only able to nod their heads before leaving the court, their honor stripped for defying their master, and carrying their unconscious captain to get medical attention for his wounds. Only Megami and Kami remained in the court after they left, as the other deities also left because they were somewhat alarmed by Kami's behavior. When the door finally closed, Megami noticed her sister's predicament and spoke. Kami's face erupted into a sigh with a frown. "Is there a problem, Kami? Chan?" With just her and her sister present, her words became softer. Even though her eyes were irritated, Kami simply looked up and grinned. At the mention of that particular devil, her frown turned into a small, wistful smile. "No. Well, not really, it's just Hellwing. Something about him is just so interesting, and I guess when those fools dared to break my law and assault him even causes me to get angrier than usual," she said. Megami simply nodded and grinned as she recalled the devil she had seen up close only moments before. Knowing the full force of his power and witnessing his transformation before her eyes was something she would never forget, nor would she attempt to. as the devil was a topic of great interest to both her and Cammy. "Ah, yes," she said, wearing a tiny smile on her face. "All I can really say is that, he's a strange one. Especially after all the times we've watched him." Cammy simply nodded as she recalled the moments she and her sister had witnessed the strange but mighty devil ascend in hell. The deities knew she and Megami had watched the devil and had questioned her, and some had just plain thought it was a bit disturbing she and her sister were so interested in the unholy being. Yet they dared to never question them, leaving the two goddesses to their actions. But watching over him over the years, the two women had strangely developed an immense interest in the devil, to the point one would question if it was admiration, affection, or plain outright love for the devil. They never dwelled on such things, nor did they dare to, but the pegging of such a thing for the two to ever love the devil, the very being who opposes all of heaven, was ludicrous, crazy, insane. And yet they couldn't deny they felt something for the devil. Their feelings for him were strange at best and could only be described at best that they held interest in him and kept an eye on him to watch as he grew into the devil he was today. "Though, I've got the strangest feeling something big is gonna happen. Something catastrophic," her words making Megami frown. Who knows? The future is always changing. My dear sister," Cammy nodded at her sister words, but couldn't help but feel something big was gonna happen. And it would shake the three realms immensely. If only the two knew this change would alter their lives forevermore. 60 years later. Hell, it's been a small yet very long 60 years in hell, and many things have happened since Naruto brought Kushina in as his slave and made her into a devil. When Naruto promised to train her in her demonic abilities the following day, he wasn't joking. He had forced her to go through the same training process he had given Mito. Like he did for Mito, he forced her to exert every effort to become stronger. She overcame every obstacle he threw at her with a strong desire to become stronger and prove herself to her master, much to Naruto's covert approval. The one who gave her a fresh start away from Ningenkai and saved her from her nightmare. By Naruto's standards, Kushina was nearly as good as Mito. It appeared that Kushina was attuned to training and sparring with either Mito or him, which caused her power to soar. However, Mito didn't take it easy. On the contrary, she trained even more diligently than before. Perhaps it was because she had a training partner. Someone she could genuinely take on without getting repeatedly thrashed. Or it might have been something else. Who knows? Mito, the long-range fighter, and Kushina, the close-range fighter, were the only two members of the perfect team that Naruto knew, for want of a better term. Their teamwork was outstanding because they both worked out their weaknesses and turned them into their strengths. They were at least able to hurt Naruto in their devil forms when they battled him together, giving it their all while forcing him to make an attempt to defend himself. Together, they were stronger than a second-level high demon, which is slightly below the level of a king and then a titan. Their power and skill increase even further when he allows them to gain experience in combating other demons. Although he was extremely strong, something inside of him has cracked over the past 60 years since he massacred the Crusader Legion in front of Mito and Megami, causing his power to increase daily. He had no idea what it was, but he welcomed it wholeheartedly because he was certain that he was stronger than Lucifer. But why was Lucifer still alive? Simple, Naruto wanted him alive. For one simple purpose, and that was to show him the difference between themselves. In both strength and ability. When the devil returned to fight Naruto, Kushina and Mito met Lucifer and observed how amusing it was in Naruto's opinion because they had been on equal footing during their previous encounter. However, Naruto was playing with the devil in that one battle, making it look equal, but it was a ruse that Naruto had maintained for years after returning with Kushina and Mito. It was effective because it kept Lucifer motivated to kill his former pupil by strengthening him. He is and always will be a fool. However, news of the Crusader Legion's punishment for disobeying Kami's law and rule did make it to hell. They were stripped of their rank and then cast into isolation. Naruto chuckled when he heard it. It was fitting, really, and amusing as well to see how the fools paid the price for their actions. But if it were him, he would skin them alive and then cast them into hell's depths, where they would suffer eternally. Although Kushina's appearance hadn't changed much since her time in hell, her clothing was more form-fitting than her friend Mito's baggy kimono. A black toby was wrapped around Kushina's waist, holding her maroon katan through it as a hoister. She wore a crimson kimono along her body, perfectly hugging her hourglass figure. Black swirls adorned her kimono while the banga of her hair were held up by a yellow hairclip. The Uzumaki insignia was etched into the back of her kimono's fabric. Overall, she looked deadly. One very deadly devil. Empress Hell. Many mistook her for the twin sister of Mito for their looks but different tastes in combat. At the moment we could find both Kushina and Mito kneeling on the ground panting. Their eyes were glistening in exhaustion yet pride at their latest achievement. For in front of them was Naruto. Standing in front of them, his arms crossed with a giant gash across his chest. There were indications of approval in his own eyes as well. "Good job you two. You've hurt me this much," Mito said, smiling as she pointed out her own response. At Mito's statement, Naruto simply shook his head. "True, but that's no way near to truly injure you. But I do see the improvement we're making. It's true that they hurt him, but..." In a matter of seconds, there was not a single bloodstain left on the wound as the gash began to heal and close. Though to even hurt him was something, for it was impossible to do due to his remarkable regeneration. "Alright, that's enough for today. Go rest, you'll need it for tomorrow's training." Which they both nodded at. Though when Naruto cast his gaze from Mito to Kushina, he saw something in her eyes that made him frown. It was sadness. Hell. Street of Helma. Walking along the streets of Helma, the village of demons of all kinds, was Naruto, his slaves on both his sides. Demons all parted way from them, or those that knew of Naruto's reputation steered clear. However, it was the children that gazed upon the devil in awe and reverence. It seemed as though their parents' tales were accurate. The legendary devil was exactly as they had been told. Everything about him was real, including his hair, face, and attire. Naruto strolled down the street with his expression as uninterested as ever. They had come to this city to obtain a means of transportation after learning that a demon titan was wreaking havoc and killing defenseless demons and kids. But in all honesty, he didn't give a damn about that. All that mattered to him was that the idiot was abusing his reputation. He used the rumors he heard that the demon was his underling to justify his actions. That was something that he didn't like at all. Naruto detested people who used their name or notoriety to get away with other things more than anything else. However, this demon was acting in this manner while using his name. He wouldn't permit. "Hello, sir." As Naruto heard the words, he turned to look behind him and saw 3 children with 2 adult demons, all of whom he believed to be Inu demons. Extremely strong demons that could be either peaceful beings who had no desire to engage in violence or powerful in their own right. He raised an eyebrow and said, "Yes, kid." His words were icy and uncaring. Kushina and Mito watched the scene with interest. Speaking to their master was uncommon, especially among children, as some were either too awed by his sight to even engage in conversation with him or were afraid of him due to stories they had heard about him from hell. "You, are you with that big, mean, B? The small female dog demon stammered as she asked. Naruto arched an eyebrow and then glanced towards the parents, who tensed before glancing at their kids with concern. He spoke while glancing back down at the kids. "Big? Meanie? No, I'm not," prompted a male Inu Yukai to look up with hopeful eyes while his tail excitedly waggled. "Are you going to look after him, then? He's caused us a lot of pain, so I mean, beat him up and take him away from here." Naruto simply glanced at the young child before turning his head back to face the original direction. "That is correct," he said before leaving, his slaves trailing behind him. The wide, hopeful eyes of all the Inu demons and those who heard the conversation were never visible to him. It had only been a few minutes since he and Naruto arrived at their assigned location. In a sense, it was a pub where he and his slaves could already sense the presence of the Yukai. Knock. All of the activity that had just taken place in the pub was silenced when the door was slammed off its hinges and into the wall. With Kushina and Mito standing behind him, observing the wide-eyed demons with icy indifference, all eyes were on Naruto. Naruto moved forward and said, "Now, who among you is named Garrosh?" he said, and as soon as he finished speaking, he pointed at a demon. That simply sprinted out the door. Naruto sighed and rubbed his temples while twitching. Before all 3 disappeared like the wind, he uttered the words, "Pathetic fool," only to show up before a demon that stopped in its tracks. In mid-step, its massive, hulking body froze. Its red eyes widened in fear as Naruto materialized before him, his purple eyes displaying a menacing expression. They were all on the streets of the Helma, with villagers alike looking upon the scene with fear of what was gonna happen. The demon was named Garrosh Hellscream, who in general was a blood-red-skinned fell orc which dwarfed the size of other regular orcs. This was another demon titan that was known for his brute strength and abilities to rupture and upheave the very ground of hell, earning him a fierce reputation as a demonic killing machine. Yet that meant nothing to the devil before him, not that he knew who this truly was. "So you're the one that's been using my name to cover up your crimes, right?" Garrosh immediately responded to his query by saying. "And who exactly are you?" When it looked at Kushina and Mito, it grinned lecherously and said, Because you know that if you attack me, my boss Hellwing Naruto will come down here and kill you. Before taking your little whores with you. This was a terrible thing to say because, for starters, Kushina and Mito both gritted their teeth in rage as waves of their demonic aura emitted from them. The second thing that happened was, Naruto's eyes gained a much more evil look in them before his eyes quickly gained a slit within. That, you foolish child, was a mistake for one. Who do you think you're talking to? You say you worked for Hellwing Naruto? Are you even aware of his appearance? Well, since I am Hellwing Naruto, allow me to show you the image. Right in front of you. When the demon's gaze finally centered on his appearance, his words caused it to recoil in disbelief. His form started to tremble shakily as the combining demonic auras started to push down on him. Taking a step forward, Naruto spoke once more as his eyes flared purple as his form flashed in demonic aura. And insulting my slaves was your second and worst mistake you'll ever make again. With that, Naruto descended upon the demon, laying down a beating so horrible that many demons that watched flinched and closed their eyes as the horrible screams from Garrosh echoed all across the village as his blood painted the walls and flew into the air. Crushing his tusks and jamming one through his chest, he sent the orc through several buildings before sending him into the ground, causing it to crater beneath the behemoth of an orc. Naruto arrived before the demon could even rise, his heel descending and slamming into the orc's chest, causing a slight crack, before the orcs collapsed in on themselves. Garrosh's eyes bulging in excruciating pain. How powerful! Garrosh was soon thrust back into an entirely new world of suffering. After 15 minutes after Garrosh had been beaten and covered in blood, Naruto and his slaves were walking down the streets. They were headed to the Hellfire Pits to dispose of the body so the demon could suffer the consequences of his actions. With Naruto, he didn't get off easy, and he most definitely won't. Too preoccupied to plead for help as his bones and flesh are burned away and then grow back, causing him to suffer incessantly. Naruto kept glancing at Kushina as they passed because he had noticed that she had been acting strangely lately, which was odd because she was usually a ball of energy. That's when he heard something. The Mister did it. He beat the big meanie. Was the voice Naruto knew too well. He noticed the 5 Inu demons in the family to his right, who were either staring at him with awe from the kids or with gratitude from the parents. The youngest, a small, female looking Inu, rushed over to him at that moment, her large black eyes wide with wonder. She smiled as she reached for his leg and glanced up at him. Thank you, sir, she said before doing something shocking. She hugged his leg. This made Naruto freeze up while Mito and Kushina looked worried at what would happen next. Their master, if anything, was cruel even to children sometimes, and his bloodlust from the little battle might not have been sated. So what if he... Only for the devil to slowly gaze down at the small Inu demon before he spoke tonelessly. It is of no trouble, he simply deserved punishment for using my name for protecting for his actions, and that is all. Now go to your parents, little one. He said, causing the demon to look before giving a timid nod once she figured out what she had done before running back to her parents. Though both redheads and one, Kushina, watched this action with a slight smile on her face before recalling her own child. Naruto moved forward without stopping a second time, followed by his 2 Uzumaki servants. She rubbed her belly while a tiny tear escaped her eye as she recalled all the time she had spent with the unborn child, the one she had given birth to but who had died on the same day as her. Although Naruto's eyes were fixed on her at her action, she never saw the frown on his face. Next day. Naruto's residence. Things have been extremely tense lately, and it has been a day since their brief excursion to Helma. Mito observed that Kushina was always silent around her and Naruto and would occasionally avoid them. They both could tell something was wrong with her, but Naruto hadn't said a thing about it yet and told Mito when she asked him for help that to let it play out. For now. That is until night came did something happen. Kushina whimpered ever so softly while tossing and turning in her bed and holding on to her sheets. Her lip quivered and trembled, and tears began to well up in her clenched eyes as the nightmares in her head continued to haunt her every second. No, Naruki-chan! Kushina screamed as she saw the Kyuubi's flowing Yukai completely vaporize her unborn child. She shook her head while holding it in both hands, revealing another image of her 1-day-old daughter. As the Kyuubi's chakra became too much for her, her vivid blue eyes began to glaze over, and soon after, much to Kushina's horror, Naruki's tiny eyes were lifeless. Naruki-chan! Naruki-chan! No! 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 Naruki-chan! Her shrill scream reverberated throughout her room, and when she realized what she had done, she attempted to hide it, but her face was streaming with tears. In his room, Naruto's purple eyes snapped open when he heard Kushina's scream and jumped out of his bed before bursting through his door. When he arrived at her door and kicked it open, he saw Kushina crying. Walking over to her, he saw she was still asleep but was still muttering the name Naruki over and over. Grasping her shoulder, he shook her. "Kushina! Wake up!" Gasping, she snapped open her eyes only to see the face of her master looking down at her with an impassive face. "Kushina! What's wrong?" His words made her look the other way before she pulled herself up and scooted away from him a bit. Nothing. Naruto. Sama," he said, although her horrified expression suggested otherwise. Realizing that his normal style would not get him anywhere, he spoke a little more softly but firmly while holding her shoulder. "Kushina, please tell me what's wrong." Before the proverbial dam broke, the woman essentially froze at his touch. His touch was enough to cause her to lose it. Prior to Naruto realizing it, Kushina was sobbing into his chest while tightly clutching his shirt. He looked down at his sobbing red-headed slave and blinked, frozen at the sudden contact, her sobs and tears soaking his shirt. "Well, this is really awkward." He put his arms around her awkwardly, seeing no other way to deal with this. He felt something in him beat a little quicker when he did this, but he scowled and pushed it down. Although it was an odd sensation, he didn't want to experience it at the moment. When he heard the door open, he turned to see Mito enter in her curious eyes. She shrugged, moved to sit across from Kushina, and began giving her a gentle back pat. With a gentle pat on her back, she said, "Kushi-chan, what's wrong?" Only for her to keep crying into Naruto's chest. They all sat there waiting for her to calm down after realizing she wouldn't be speaking for a while. It took a few minutes, but slowly and assuredly Kushina slowly got control of herself. Yet she was still in Naruto's arms. Pulling away a bit, she wiped her eyes from her red puffy eyes. "I apologize for that." Mito simply rubbed her back while Naruto continued to stare at her curiously. "It is not a problem, Kushina. Tell me what's wrong now." Knowing she couldn't get out of this, she sighed. "It's just, I miss her. I miss my baby Naruto. Sama. My daughter. My Masumi. My Naruki-chan. Every time I go to sleep I have nightmares of her little baby form dead in so many ways. They won't quit haunting me and it's starting to tear me apart." She closed her eyes to conceal the tears after finishing. Mito simply gazed at her with a dejected expression. Naruto himself frowned before sighing in a bit of irritation. "I see, I was afraid of this." "Well, you see, Kushina, the reason you're like this is because you didn't live a full life. Unlike Mito here, who lived a good century and 20 years. You died a young life as a newly first mother, a way that is quite possibly the worst way to die. So it's no surprise you're being haunted by visions from your previous life," he said, looking at Kushina with curious eye. "It also makes it a bit worse that you have these dreams since you feel you have no one you truly believe will help her. This is what happens when mortals don't live to their fullest and die so early on." Which made Kushina look down sadly, knowing she had died so early on the day of her daughter's birth. "On the other hand, I would like to know if Kushina's Jinchuriki identity is a secret." Kushina simply nodded, her head still resting on Naruto's chest as she felt the tiniest warmth and comfort from him. "Yes, it is a well-kept secret that she is a Jinchuriki. That is how Mito and I kept our position secret. No one ever knew what we were hiding." Naruto nodded in agreement. "I see that your daughter is doing okay. If the secret is kept safe, she should be leading a somewhat normal life. If she were to inherit your good fortune, her future may be brighter. So there's no need to worry, Kushina." The woman reluctantly nodded before dozing off in Naruto's arms, which made Naruto feel even more uncomfortable and made him appear like a Mito. She got up, giggling at his almost anxious expression, and then assisted Naruto in putting her back to sleep. They left the room after realizing she was alright, with Mito continuing to give her form a dejected glance before she left first. With a look in his eyes that conveyed something, Naruto himself gave her form a single look as he left, shutting the door. Something none one would see in his eyes ever. It was sadness. Unaware that this incident would set off a series of events that would permanently upend the three realms, he shut the door. However, later on, even though Mito and her adored master were helping her, she felt the impact of not seeing her daughter more strongly than ever before. Even though she did her best to hide it, it was gradually becoming more difficult every day. Just seeing her little daughter dead and, now ways of calling out her kept haunting her even more. Now though it finally got to her and, she needed help and she needed it now, she desired to eliminate the nightmares that plague her constantly. Thus, it was quite unexpected when Kushina emerged from the woods with a very anxious expression in her eyes while Naruto and Mito were practicing outside of Naruto's house. Mito blinked before he spoke, and Naruto arched an eyebrow at her. "Hey Kushi-chan, is there a problem?" This time, the red-haired woman simply stopped dead in her tracks. She was standing directly in front of Naruto, her head lowered, her shoulders trembling, her hands clenched so tightly that they were popping and cracking under the strain. Naruto. Sama. I realize I've been acting a little weird lately, but it's been kind of weird for me to say that. The fact is that I miss my child terribly and I really want to see her. Before lowering herself to her knees in front of her master, she yelled the final word. She knew that what she was doing was extremely dishonorable, especially for her master, but she was powerless to stop herself. She missed her Naruki. Chan, her infant daughter. She wanted to see her, to give her a hug, anything at all. As Mito slowly closed her eyes and a sorrowful smile appeared on her face, Naruto continued to stare at Kushina. She has been bothered by that. Why didn't she notice it? She believed Kushina had already moved on, but... However, she could see the hesitation in her master's eyes as he considered his response to her. I see. Do you want to see her? Is that right? Kushina simply nodded, unwilling to raise his gaze. However, Naruto had none of that, so he slowly knelt down, cupped her chin, and slowly raised her face to reveal her tear-streaked face with her eyes glistening wet from the tears. Every second her lip quivered and trembled. Kushina, is that what you want? Which, before speaking, the woman simply broke down even more. Yes. My baby is wanted. Dude. Prior to pressing her face against his chest. He sighed when he heard her response, then looked at Mito, who nodded. In response, Kushina, who was currently in Mito's arms, simply nodded. Very well then. I can do that. I can't take you to her but, I can show you how she's doing at the moment. Yes. That's fine. I just want to see if my baby is okay. Her voice strained to the max as her eyes were cast down in shame for doing what she did. She wanted to see her child but was unable to control herself and started crying and screaming at her master. Only in her sister Figure's arms did she feel better because she was so awful and disappointed in herself. I see. That makes sense. I was actually expecting you to ask this, but I waited for you to do so. Anyway, let's get started. Naruto muttered a few words before speaking. Demon Magic. Viewing Mirror. Akuma no Yona Magiku. Hyoji Mira. Naruto then unlocked a large mirror that showed him the person he was interested in. When Kushina's daughter was shown, he made numerous predictions. He foresaw that she would lead a reasonably normal life, one in which she would even be protected. He was completely mistaken, because hell would be rocked to its foundation when he opened the mirror. Ah! Stop it! Leave me alone! Was the female child. Like cries of the little blonde red-haired girl in the mirror. Her pleas for mercy unheard as the people attacking her didn't stop. The 5-year-old girl had long, golden hair with red streaks, was dressed only in rags, and had 3 whisker marks on either side of her face. Her eyes had the purest blue, as if you were gazing into the ocean. Her body appeared to be severely malnourished, but among other things, there were wounds and injuries. Her face itself was bleeding as tears freely roamed down her pudgy face. No, demon scum. You'll pay for you've done. Feel the pain from your betters. Shouted a drunk shinobi as civilian and shinobi alike beat and abused the little child. Beer bottles, weapons, kunai, senbon, shuriken and worst of all katanas. The 3 all watched this in emotions going throughout their bodies. Mito was trembling in anger, sadness and most of all hate. Her form trembled and shook as tears fell from her furious eyes as her shoulders and arms shook with each passing hit that was upon the little child. Kushina herself was more on the verge of a breakdown. Her face was formed into the shape of horror and anger mixed in. Her eyes were glistening in anger yet terror for the child. Her arms were wrapped around herself as she watched the scene of the little girl, her own daughter, be tortured. Her daughter's pleas for mercy rang through her ears clear as day. She felt so horrible she wasn't there to help her, keep her safe like a mother should and tell her it was okay. By Kami. I'm the worst mother. Naruto himself though was acting strange. His eyes were full on the scene with a strange look in his eyes as his right hand trembled and twitched every so often. His mouth twitched a bit like he was about to growl or snarl something bad. Slowly, he lifted his right hand and glanced at the child in the mirror. Isn't the secret of being a Jinchuriki supposed to be kept secret, Kushina? Which he received his response to from Kushina after she essentially nodded. Then, what on earth am I seeing? His words were so icy that they caused the 2 to uncontrollably shiver. After that, he took another look at his right hand. Kushina's pregnant belly was swollen when the hand touched it. The same one that experienced the unborn child's numerous excited kicks. The same child who played the little touch dot and kick game and rubbed. He glanced at the child again and saw her cries of pain, yells of anguish, and pleas for mercy as well as tears streaming from her eyes. As he spoke, Naruto's right hand rapidly clenched as he gazed up at the crimson sky of hell. Kami, do you see it now? Are you really that oblivious or uninformed about your creations? His eyes glowed purple as the ground beneath them cracked and shook. Your precious mortals. Look at what they are doing to their savior. They are torturing her. A child, an innocent soul with not a touch of sin in her body. If you won't do something about this, he said. His Yukai energy was growing as Kushina and Mito stared at him bewildered. And quickly, someone. Aid me, please, was the final pleas from Naruki. The choked back sobs of Mito, the cries and mutters of Kushina finally set him off. Like a fucking bomb. Then, as his body simply flashed with his rising energies, his eyes took on an even more sinister glow before his mouth twisted into a demonic snarl. Then I will. Because such a gift is not worthy of those pathological fools. Naruto broke inside. Naruto felt a sense of power from long ago. His eyes flashed purple and glowed, but they had no pupils until a thin demonic slit appeared in them. His body erupted in pure black Yukai with occasional purple striations, concealing it from both his two anxious slaves and the public. Many people felt the enormous buildup of Yukai energy throughout Hell because it was simply too great to ignore. All of Hell was able to witness the sudden explosion of pure black and purple, streaked Yukai that burst into the skies of Hell itself. Some people became so agitated by the enormous ball of Yukai, which grew larger and larger every second, that they either lost control of their bladders or simply perished as a result of the sudden expulsion of such Yukai. The sea of blood itself boiled, the mountains shook and collapsed, the ground shook, and the sky itself appeared to be about to collapse on them all. At that point, all of that Yukai, all that power that was just so unimaginable just. As the wild and chaotic demonic energy now did something even more horrifying, the ball of energy condensed, shrinking further and further. It grew more powerful, surpassing even the demonic titans in strength, and it loomed over Hell, making many people feel insignificant in comparison. Many people saw it then. The location of the explosion was the source of the enormous shadow that hung over Hell. Only when its form shifted and showed its true appearance did many freeze in petrifying terror. For in front of them all was a crimson-eyed apparition, it being passing the red sky itself looming over Hell. It could be seen that the apparition was demonic in nature. No, demonic isn't the right word. What is the right word is horrible, frightfully terrifying. It appeared to be able to rip through the toughest of divine metal thanks to its maw's glowing purple, enormous, razor sharp teeth. Its enormous wings nearly covered the sea of blood, the shadowed Hell, and even the mountains themselves. Its curved horns protruded from its head in a curved pattern past its forehead. However, the eyes, oh Kami, the eyes, were like looking into the angry eyes of God. It appeared as though the death avatar was right in front of those eyes. They were so full of vengeance and bloodlust that they glowed crimson, to the point where many felt compelled to ask Kami herself for forgiveness. Lucifer himself felt the extremely potent, even divine, energy explosion deep within a castle. Glancing out, he saw the one thing that made him frown. Spitting out the name like it was pure venom, he said, "This is your doing, isn't Hellwing?" It was then that he heard footsteps behind him. Lilith's sultry voice said, so this is Naruto's power. Lucifer, you never told me he was this powerful." Her sultry smile could make any mortal man bow down before her, and her purple-skinned body was flawless. As she focused on the apparition that towered over the castle itself, her eyes glistened with curiosity and excitement. Lucifer grunted as he said, "He's been hiding this from me. All this time, throughout all of our conflicts, he has resisted me. He is crazy." As his own demonic energy blasted out of him, he yelled. Even Lilith remained motionless, her eyes dancing with laughter at Lucifer's indignation. She licked her lips as her body shivered and trembled with excitement, but her eyes did shift back to the apparition. "Hellwing, I wonder how our first meeting will go." Sight of explosion, Kushina and Mito watched the apparition that materialized in the sky with a mixture of awe and fear as they took in the scene. The power, it was so amazing it rose up above the demon titans, and they were pretty sure by now it was up to par with the deities. Though that's when the apparition started to shrink. It condensed smaller and smaller until it got all the way down into the crater. The crater itself looked as if you could place the sea of blood itself within. It was enormous. Only when the apparition reached the very bottom did they see what become of their master. And they did somewhat, for his figure looked shadowy at best, but it struck fear into their hearts when they saw the demonic glowing purple eyes of the shadow loom onto them. Their breath hitched when its gaze fell upon them, They truly felt like nothing to this being. This power was so monstrous. That's when the shadow itself sinked into Naruto's body, showing their master in all his glory, but the wrathful look in his eyes and the power behind them and coming off his body showed something happened within him. Something ancient, something powerful awoke and made him snap. His power was at least tenfold of what his was before. It was like the proverbial dam that held back his true power cracked and broke after being hit with its last hit. His body was just seeping out Yukai, and waves upon waves of his power came off of him. His clothes blew in the wind, as did his hair. The purple glow of his eyes flashed with so much anger that it made the two flinch. Kushina. Mito. It's time we paid a little visit to Ningenkai. The demonic tone in his voice made them both shiver in what they didn't know, but there was one thing that was for sure. They had never witnessed their master so enraged in their entire life. However, it was startling to see such an emotionless devil's eyes glow with so many emotions. They witnessed a wide range of emotions, including rage, hatred, and retaliation, but the most striking of all was when they remembered what he had said, they stood up, a little shook by their master's condition, and leapt to his side. It was the most pure, wrathful fury anyone could evoke. They nodded stiffly, and Naruto simply snapped his fingers before a red demonic circle materialized beneath them. Yes, Naruto. Sama. They said. The demonic language was too complex for either of them to understand, and at that moment, a reddish glow surrounded them from below as hellfire flames erupted all around. Before they all sank into the circle and vanished with it, leaving behind a massive cratered area infested with Yukai, their bodies were soon completely covered. Sato. Konohagakure. Ningenkai Naruki was a terrified woman with tears streaming down her face as she ran on her tiny legs through the streets of Konoha. She is being pursued by hordes of shinobi and civilians alike, all of whom have murderous looks in their eyes and crazy smiles. Many were just ecstatic about being able to harm the demon, and many wielded weapons of all kinds. She slowed her pace as she ran around a corner to catch her breath, and tears and blood spilled onto the cement floor from her arms and legs. Why her? It was extremely painful for her to be the victim of this kind of injustice. She had no parents to protect and care for her, and she was alone with only the voice in her head as a friend. Her childish voice, strained from all the agonizing screaming she's done from the beatings she's received from the people of the village where she lived, said, "Why? What have I done? Why? Hey, I found the demon. This way." Her eyes widened in terror before looking back to see the running mob, and right then turned around and ran as fast as she could, hoping and praying she could get away with not getting injured badly this time. Her eyes snapped open in horror as she ran into Konoha's main street, proving that luck wasn't on her side, because she was surrounded by throngs of armed civilians and shinobi, all of whom had the same sick smile. As she looked back in the hopes of making her getaway, she realized that the pursuing mob had also surrounded her. She trembled a little and did what she knew was the only thing she could do. That was to huddle on the ground in the hopes that the beating would stop. When she heard the giant mob's numerous advancing footsteps and their plans to make her scream, tears came out of her eyes. She whimpered, huddled even more. "Please, someone, please, help me." When she heard the crowd's repeated gasps, her prayer was somehow answered. After some time, she opened her eyes slightly without experiencing any pain and noticed something. It was amazing in front of her because something she couldn't identify was glowing slightly reddish beneath her. Akemi let out a sudden gasp in her head. This teleportation circle, my Kami Sama, is only utilized by the strongest demons. Akemi.ne. Chan. The public's cries of indignation echoed in Akemi's ears before she could respond. The demon. It's doing something, quick, kill it. Hurry. And the shinobi did, or at least tried to, only for them to the growing horror of many. Upon getting within an inch inside the faintly glowing red circle, did their bodies suddenly combust in strangely colored flames as their screams erupted from their mouths, echoing all around Konoha. Both their eyes and their flesh melted. Their bones became nothing more than ash and dust. Wow! Was Naruki's astonished thought as she witnessed her assailant being killed in front of her eyes in the most breath-taking manner imaginable. However, no one noticed that black lightning began to dance across the sky, turning the sky itself blood red. Before strange runes in a language no one could possibly decipher began to appear, the reddish circle surrounding Naruki glowed even brighter. What's happening? A terrified civilian exclaimed. He never received his response because, to their horror and Naruki's increasing astonishment, the ground began to tremble and shake like an impending earthquake, causing numerous buildings to collapse and civilians to nearly fall into the cracks created by the shaking. When the same fires that killed the two shinobi suddenly erupted from the cracks, destroying anyone nearby the ground cracks, they believed it was over. Additionally, buildings began to spontaneously collapse in a hellfire. That which illuminated Konoha's now waking village, and only when lightning struck did someone look up and scream. What the heavens are red. Many people were terrified to see a blood-red sky full of black lightning when they looked up. Before hearing something behind her, Naruki gazed up at the sky in wonder. Slowly, she turned to see what appeared to be that strange fire beginning to rise. At that moment, these three sparks of hellfire appeared out of nowhere, to the amazement of Naruki and Akemi's tense silence. Open up before the sounds of many upon many bats filled the air, getting the attention of the crowd. Following the bats that circled where they came out of in a column did a red light come out of all three fire holes. That's when, to the horror and fear of the crowd, did the one thing none expected to come out. It was humanoid shapes of what seemed to be humans that which were covered in bats from head to toe. The taller of the two only a foot away from Naruki. When they all came out completely did the bat skin crack with crimson lines which glowed faintly. The cracks got more frequent before suddenly the crowd was blown yards away from their position and back into the air. Oddly enough, though, Naruki remained in the same spot, her eyes wide with wonder and amazement at what she was witnessing. Because she was seeing two of the most beautiful women she had ever seen. She wanted to touch their red hair because it appeared so smooth and soft. The one though with longer red hair was strangely smiling at her. No way. That means if they're here. Naruki heard her, but she shivered as she looked at the last person standing directly in front of her, his massive statue. His bright purple eyes were fixed on Konoha, and she thought that just by looking at him, Konoha would collapse. However, she questioned who these individuals were and whether they would harm her as well. She shuddered at the thought. After glancing around Konoha in sheer disgust, Naruto himself glanced down at Naruki, causing her to tremble. Before he looked up at all the writhing humans in front of him, he clenched his fist even harder when he saw the wounds and blood on her body. To his dismay, he could smell their hatred, their fear, and the foul stench of urine. The fools all but soiled themselves. Pathetic. His words reverberated throughout the space, and Naruki reluctantly glanced up at him upon seeing his commanding presence. Child. Yes. Sir. She went wide-eyed as Naruto simply walked by her and said, "Go to your mother. You two have been separated for long enough and your reunion has been long overdue." He turned to see Kushina grinning at her. Both her and Naruki's eyes were welling with tears. K.Ka.San. Her voice was merely a tremor of hope, hoping that what she was witnessing was real and not just one of her many dreams or a delusion. After giving Naruki a kind smile, Kushina knelt down and extended her arms. The little girl only needed to hear the words, "Naruki-chan, come here," before running to Kushina and practically jumping into her arms before sobbing. Ka.San. You're here. Even though she had never met her mother before, she could sense deep down that this woman was her mother. Her mother was this lovely woman. As she held Naruki in her arms, Kushina only shed a single tear, and Mito grinned at the family get-together while kneeling next to her, until she and Naruto heard the humans reorienting themselves, that is. W. Who are you? You're helping that demon, but why? A shinobi exclaimed. Before Naruto spoke, he merely glanced at the man after Mito had glared at a mortal. Now die like the pitiful, filthy mortal you are. I don't talk to people like you. Naruto then spoke while pointing his hand outward at the crowd of shinobi and civilians. As darkness began to cover his extended arm, he said, "Kushina, stay with her. Mito, stay with them. Who knows when heaven's forces will be here." Seeing that he wouldn't accept a no the way she would, she nodded and remained by Kushina and Naruki's side. In addition, she sensed Naruto's desire to vent some repressed rage. When her master kills, the show is always so good. After saying, "Good then. Now, let the slaughter begin," he looked at the frightened crowd and growled. Die. Bakuhatsu no Yami no Bakuden, exploding darkness bomb, was released, and the massacre that would go down in history as the bloodiest of all began. From Naruto's hand, a ball of darkness sped toward the crowd of people, including shinobi and civilians, members of the council or clan. A monstrous wave of pure darkness swept through everything in its path, destroying several buildings and portions of their walls. Because the explosion was so massive, all of Konoha's shinobi were drawn to it and rushed to its source. Nevertheless, Naruki was in awe of what the character she called the scary man, Naruto, did. When Kushina saw her daughter's eyes at the scene of what Naruto had just done, she simply smiled and embraced her. because a group of civilians was reduced to ash before Naruto's hand was extended. For miles upon miles, a gigantic trench the size of the explosion was visible. Naruto's face twisted in disgust as he spat on the ground, then he simply turned around and said, "Quit hiding and come on out, you pathetic ninja." Naruto then caused several shinobi shadows to emerge around him, including a large number of Junin and Anbu. Although there were a lot of numbers, to him, not even a warm up was involved. He spoke as he took a step forward, his demonic aura erupting around him, causing the ground to crack and the surrounding building walls to break. Let this be recorded in history. Let heaven and all of Ningenkai know that Konohagakure no Sato experienced its first mass murder. Naruto practically leapt at the startled shinobi with that. What followed was never seen by them. He grabbed one of the shinobi's heads and snarled before snapping it. When he saw the terror's eyes widen, his snarl changed to a ruthless, icy grin. He grunted as he turned to face the charging shinobi, then twisted the head even more before ripping it off and spraying the approaching shinobi with blood like a fountain. He then planted the disembodied head into the face of a shinobi who was sneaking up behind him, breaking his mask and, essentially, fusing the head into the other's cracking and shattering skulls with just force. He spun around, slammed his foot into the ground, and then, to the horror of many, a hellfire erupted, burning them and the nearby buildings to the ground. He spoke while holding out his right hand in an odd manner. To the horror of many, a gigantic fist the size of a hellfire titan formed over Konoha's civilian district in Haru. Taiton no Kobushi, Hellfire. Titan's fist. Kyuubi herself is the size of it. As soon as it hit the ground, a tremendous explosion of hellfire wiped out half of Konoha's village. No children, civilians, or shinobi were spared as the ball of flame vanished and destroyed everything it came into contact with. Men, women, and children were all killed. None were spared from his wrath. Soon, the bodies of the dead were scattered across the ground, and some of them were wailing as the extreme heat caused their flesh to melt. Mito exclaimed, "Wow! Naruto! Sama isn't pulling any punches," as she observed the flaming ball of doom illuminate the crimson sky. She watched with a chilly chuckle as Naruto slaughtered more vengeful shinobi. As Naruki continued to stare at Naruto's form in what appeared to be some kind of remembrance. Naruto's glowing evil eyes pierced the smoke of fire and sulfur like butter, his cloak billowing in the wind and smoke. There were several mutilated shinobi bodies all around him, each dead in their own way. The sound of dripping could be heard because Naruto's hand was shooting through Uchiha's skull as the dead body hung from his arm. He slid off the Uchiha with a wave of his arm before turning to his right. Another shinobi force. Foolish. After that, he turned to his right and said, "Akuma Magiku. Jigoku no Kokaku. Demon Magic. Skeletal Hands of Hell." And then, before the Uzumaki's astonishment and wonder, did a hole in the ground behind him burst open. A group of shinobi suddenly materialized above it. As skeletal hands covered in hellfire erupted and dragged them down from the air and into the rupture, Naruto grinned as he saw their faces change from one of hate and rage to one of horror and fear. Ah, the fire, the pain, oh sweet Kami, ah. What the heck are these things? Wait no. His skull was crushed in by the bone hand, which silenced the last one. As their flesh and bones burned and turned to ash by the fires of hell, Naruto simply grinned viciously and enjoyed the sounds of the humans' cries and cries for mercy. He watched with satisfaction as they were drawn into the rupture. Then, with a chakra signature higher than the others, he felt another forcing from his left, which infuriated him. Shinobi after shinobi erupted from the streets, with the highest level Anbu in the lead and the heads of the Konoha shinobi clans in front of them. It was the last one that caused Mito to raise an eyebrow. The person was Senju Tsunade, the granddaughter of Konohagakure's Godem Hokage and Tobarama Senju. The creature in front of them, who had ruined so much of their village, filled her amber eyes with rage and disgust. Every clan head in Konoha was with her, dressed and prepared for combat, but Naruto simply spoke and ignored them. His indifferent gaze returned to its usual indifferent one. Pathetic. If this is how strong Ningenkai has to offer, then I'm sorely disappointed, he said. Tsunade spoke on behalf of the shinobi, who appeared to be annoyed by his disregard for them. Who are you? Why did you do this, too? Naruto merely glanced at her, but when his purple demonic eyes locked on her, it was enough to send her into a tizzy. She soon experienced an overwhelming sense of pure demonic energy, which caused her to tremble in horrified fear. He turned around and raised his hand in the air, growling at the woman's pitiful behavior. He said, "Pathetic mortals. Witness. The very bringer of your home's slaughter. before revealing his glowing slitted eye over his shoulder. Naruto spoke before anyone else could speak or say a word. At that moment, everyone was watching. Haru. Barajingu Ryusei Shawa. Hellfire. Blazing meteor shower. As a loud rumbling sound could be heard. They looked up abruptly to see the Konoha shinobi's horror and Tsunade's fear as hellfire engulfed meteors, which were the size of medium-sized buildings, were falling on them. As he returned to Mito and Kushina, he smiled at their fear. Naruki was still in Kushina's arms, but her gaze was fixed on the sky in utter wonder. His demonic words, "Watch. Konoha shall burn. Let this be a sign for all of Ningenkai," caused Naruki to awaken from her daze and glance up at Naruto's form, but she never experienced any pain before a flash blinded her. She saw Naruto kneeling over Kushina, his purple eyes gleaming with a hint of amusement, and his hand rubbing over her stomach. Before the light went out, she memorized his face and eyes and then showed that she was back where she had been, in the arms of her mother, who had come out. She glanced back up at Naruto, who was currently enjoying himself immensely as he watched the mortals in front of him scream and yell in terror. "Naruto. Sama. Allow me to handle these fools," Mito said, glaring at Tsunade as she approached him. He simply nodded and looked at her before vanishing in a blur. When she appeared in front of the shinobi, she slammed her foot into the ground, causing some of them to stumble and shaking the area. However, it caught everyone's attention. However, many were shocked or, in Tsunade's case, completely stunned when they saw her. Mito. Sama. Her voice was one of surprise and wonder at seeing the legendary woman in person. After giving Tsunade a quick glance, Mito sneered. "Don't, Mito. Sama, me, Senju. I already know what you did to Tsunade during your tenure as Hokage, and you're just as low as your pitiful family to do such things to Naruki." She could tell that Tsunade had done something to expose Naruki as the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, so her words were laced with venom, which resulted in her hatred and abuse. Tsunade recoiled at what she was saying and attempted to speak, but Mito's appearance in front of her silenced her. Mito's steel-like hand gripped her neck, holding her in midair. In a desperate attempt to loosen the hold, her feet hung off the ground, only for Mito to tighten his hold. "Now, Senju, watch Master's work on your pathetic village and see how your stupid family's creation is reduced to nothing more than a smoldering crater." With that, she steered Tsunade toward the flaming meteors, causing her to watch in horror as the flaming rocks struck the earth. Boom! Several spheres of hellfire appeared throughout Konoha, destroying it and killing everyone in its path as it glowed like a Christmas tree. Both civilians and shinobi ran around screaming, their bodies burning as they fell to the ground, leaving only ash in their wake. There was nothing but smoldering dirt left after buildings were reduced to dust in the wind. As human screams and yells reverberated throughout Konoha, along with the cries of children, ash, dust, and smoke blew in the wind. Mito carelessly threw Tsunade into a building, causing it to collapse on her as she watched it all with tears in her eyes. After spitting on the ground, she turned to face her master and proceeded to his location. Watching the scene, the shinobi simply turned red and charged in blind rage, only to commit their final error. The shinobi was horrified when a dark circle materialized behind Mito in Fools. Akuma Magiku. Saoryu Sheisei Doriganzu. Demon Magic. Soul-eating dragons. Suddenly, several black dragons emerged with their maws agape. They were too late to react, and as the dragons swooped down on them, their mouths gaped open in a silent scream. She approached the others without faltering and bowed her head at Naruto, who merely nodded, before gaining Kushina's side again. When Naruto looked around and saw that no one else was pursuing them, he abruptly scowled as he looked up at the sky. They heard him say, So they send him. Quite desperate they are. And gave him a curious look before noticing him looking up. Naruki gasped in the same way that Kushina and Mito did. Before a figure could be seen floating down, a bright hole appeared, dividing the crimson sky. When Naruto realized who it was, he simply scowled. It was a man when it became obvious who it was. His height was approximately 6 feet 5, but everything else was covered by a huge black cloak that had torn ends. Only his bright white eyes, which were displaying boredom, were visible on his otherwise veiled face. The true eye-catcher, however. On his back were the angelic wings, which were a dull gray color and dispersed over a distance of 15 feet. At last, the enormous Zanbato was fastened to his back. Naruto just spoke while gazing at the creature. Well, isn't it true that Kami sends her best work when she can hardly control her own creations, Abaddon? His voice shifting to one that was more demonic. The man simply stared at him. his eyes shifting from one of boredom to one of curiosity and joy. Hellwing. Funny. It has been millennia. How are you? The man's choice of words caused Naruto to simply shake his head, while Naruki and his two slaves looked on in interest. The shadowed man's face lit up with a white smirk as he said, "You never change, but then again you wouldn't be Abaddon if you had. As have you. Have we caused trouble?" Naruto rolled his eyes at this, but then the man's cloaked form stiffened and his voice became more solemn. "Now, what have you done, collectively, to bring about the wrath of the gods this time?" To which Naruto simply waved his question away in a nonchalant way. The man's eyes narrowed when he said, "Nothing really, just doing a little cleanup. Pathetic humans here and there." "You mean to say, slaughter? Like this?" Naruto shrugged and looked at Konoha's smoldering form with indifference. The man simply shook his head in frustration. "Yeah, you can call it that if you want. I have seen enough of these pitiful humans to know they just aren't worth living. There are nothing but sinful beings of the highest order. You know that as well as I, Abaddon. Yes, I won't deny it, but you have infuriated the Kami court with this action, Naruto, because you are holding the child of prophecy, and Kami cannot allow that to continue." Naruto simply grunted. "I don't care what she thinks. If she's just going to sit on her throne and watch a child get beaten, then no, I'll do whatever I want, and I'd like to see anyone, god or not, attempting to stop me." His tone became more aggressive and icy. Abaddon himself gave Naruto a serious glance before he grasped his Zanbato, something neither Mito nor Kushina had ever heard before. "Then you give me no choice but to enrage the gods and disturb Kami's court. I am commanded to murder you." Hellwing Naruto. The devil merely shook his head and took on a solemn expression. "You are a fool." With that, Abaddon vanished, and Naruto followed. Then, as if in a deadly silence, the room fell silent, and before anyone could say another word. Clang. With Naruto's Nodaichi blocking the Zanbato, Abaddon and Naruto emerged in midair. Before they resurfaced on the ground and caused another clash that uprooted trees and set them on fire, they vanished again at godlike speeds. Naruto ducked a swipe while leaning to the left, then swiftly slashed Abaddon across the chest, leaving a lengthy gash on his cloak. Angel merely grunted, but before he could strike back, Naruto attacked him even more violently than he had previously believed was possible. After dodging a stab to the right, he felt pain in his stomach and looked down to see Naruto's fist pierce his stomach. After saying, "You've gotten slow," Naruto withdrew his fist, causing Abaddon to clutch his stomach in agony before the angel could catch his breath. Naruto drew out his Nodaichi and knelt down, gripping his weapon tightly. Abaddon cursed when he saw what Naruto was going to do. "Now, I end this," he said, but in a single flash, Naruto was behind the angel, his weapon extended in a way that suggested it was swung. He then got back up and allowed his Nodaichi to vanish into a hellfire pillar. Abaddon stood there, and then his Zanbato itself broke in two, and several gashes appeared on his cloak in a flash. His voice was strained as he said, What the? You were never this strong before." After hearing what he had to say, Naruto chose to ignore it and approached him. He spoke while holding his cloak in his other hand, which was glowing darkly. "Now, go tell Kami and those other idiots about this." He then threw him into the air before vanishing, saying, "If they come after me again, I will make Ningenkai my own personal underworld. Now, gone from my sight. And become stronger. You've become weak." The angel was sent after he delivered a bone-breaking kick to Abaddon's ribs and then reappeared in front of his suspended body spinning around, hearing an audible crack and grunt of pain from him. At speeds no one could possibly understand, they flew through the air and into the high no Kuni forests, passing through trees. After he moved out of his way, Naruto disappeared and grunted as he appeared in front of the three Uzumakis. He nodded at his assumption, and they all stood up. Naruki held gently in Kushina's arm, but her eyes remained on Naruto's form in awe. "Now, let us go. I tire of this place. And the child needs some food, before she dies of starvation." Mito looked at her master and remembered that he had spoken to the angel in a friendly way, which piqued her interest. "You, Naruto. Sama. Who was that man, if I may?" As he spoke, the devil simply snapped his fingers, creating a portal. As Kami's bounty hunter, he is the strongest of her angels, surpassing even the Crusader Legion. That made her raise an eyebrow, but she didn't press the issue because she knew it was her master's past and she didn't need to know too much. He is the Archangel Abaddon, and at one time a fellow acquaintance, but he has let his skills get rusty. After that, the four of them entered the portal and left, never to see Ningenkai again for a while. Hellwing Naruto himself led the four members of the party as they left Ningenkai through the dark portal. His pale, masculine face was depicted as a face that was always emotionless. Kushina, his second slave, was standing next to him. She had a sleeping Naruki in her arms, and her purple eyes seemed to be beaming with love and care for the girl. On his left, Mito was observing the newly united family. She glanced at her master and smiled appreciatively. Feeling Mito's eyes on him, Naruto turned to his left and saw her grinning at him. He rolled his eyes at that and then continued. He discreetly glanced at Kushina as he smothered the young child, and something sent a tiny shockwave through his black heart as he did so. He had no idea what it was, but he was telling himself it wasn't anything like what he had assumed. Narrowing his eyes, he could feel the yokai assembling around Naruki and realized they had to move quickly to prevent the child from experiencing the negative effects of hell. He mentally frowned as he surveyed the area where his house and outpost once stood. He said, "Mito, Kushina, come. We must hurry before the yokai affects her," as he glanced over at the Uzumakis. The two women looked at him bewilderedly as the 5-year-old girl simply clung more to her mother's warmth, saying, "Since the house is destroyed, we'll be going to my secondary base of operations." Not to be impolite, but where is this other house, Naruto-sama? Mito inquired, and her devil master merely looked at her before snapping his fingers to open a portal again. He said, "It is located near the volcano of Unmei, Doom. Once there we shall go into the house where we can begin Naruki's transformation." Kushina and Mito nodded, understanding that the only way for Naruki to live in hell if she were to be doing so was to become a demon, but they didn't really care. To them, humanity was essentially a repulsive term. As Kushina cradled her tiny Masumi in her arms once more, they were genuinely overjoyed to have chosen the life they currently lead. A pair of eyes observing them with utter disgust and hatred for the three devils, however, was something that no one saw or even sensed. Side of the volcano cliffs as Naruto and the group emerged from the portal, they saw the cliff of a massive volcano, the peak of which extended past the black blood clouds. Lava appeared to flow down its shell, somehow separating it from the cliffside itself, and the two appeared to be in awe of the sight. Naruto's voice roused them from their daze and hurried them toward him, saying, "Mito, Kushina, stop standing and hurry up." Following her master, Kushina glanced down at Naruki, but to her increasing horror, her face contorted as if she were in pain, and her whimpering didn't help either. With an impatient expression in his eyes, Naruto appeared next to Kushina as if he had heard the little whimper. Before removing Naruki from Kushina's stunned form, he said, "Damn it, the effect of the yokai is spreading faster than I thought. I'm gonna need to improvise." He then turned to face Kushina and Mito and said, "Follow me." He then shot off deep into a cavern inside the volcano, and they immediately followed him in. They never saw a shadow of a creature within the shadowed cliffside, unsure of what their master would do. When Kushina and Mito finally caught up to their master inside the cavern, they discovered him standing in a runic circle that resembled the ones he had used on them, but this time it was written differently. Another difference was that Naruto himself was holding the young girl in his arms in the middle of the ceiling circle rather than a lifeless body. He appeared to be slowly releasing his yokai into the arcanic circle's runes. As his hands grasped the quivering Naruki, his eyes appeared to glow slowly. "Kushina. Mito. Things are gonna have to be done differently with the girl's case," he said, speaking in a somewhat demonic tone while glancing at the two anxious slaves. "She appears to be gradually being torn apart on the inside by the Biju's yokai and the limitless quantity of yokai in Makai." When Kushina heard this, she nearly started crying. Her soul itself is being corrupted and will soon either die or become nothing more than a bloodthirsty demon. He said, "Don't worry, though. I have another way to fix this, but I will say that Naruki won't be human anymore and will become a devil like us." Before she could interrupt him after noticing this, "I will have to inject not only my own yokai but also my own blood into her in order to balance the yokai that is pushing into her from the outside and the one that is coming from within. As you can see, the yokai power I give her would literally tear her to pieces without any questions, but if I were to use my blood to override her human genes, it would turn her into a devil like me." They both had to nod when they heard that her body would survive the transfer. They both believed that the Akemi within the young girl was protecting her in some way, even if it was causing her some pain in the process. They knew that the only way for the girl to survive was to turn into a demon. It was a miracle that she hadn't already been ripped apart by the energies within Makai. After she finished speaking, Kushina turned to face her master with a resolute expression. "Master. Please. Save my little girl. I don't care what happens, I just want her to live." where I can hold her in my arms and protect her like I should have done when she was just born." Hearing this, Naruto turned back to the little girl in his arms and sighed. "All right, Uzumaki Naruki will be spared from either hell's torment or a fate worse than death. Allow her to change and become my daughter in every way possible. Allow her to be born again," he shouted before his eyes practically lit on fire. Purple flames engulfed his eyes as blood started to pour from his eyes and body. It all but soaking the little girl in his arms and the blood touching the runic circle he stood upon. Looking down at the girl, he set her down in the puddle of blood before he kneeled down at her side and spoke a spell that he had yet to ever and thought he would never use. He put both of his hands on the pool of his blood after saying, "Akuma Magiku. Akuma no Kaitenso. Demon Magic, Demonic Blood Transfer." He watched along with Kushina and Mito as the blood began to stretch toward Naruki's trembling body and red runes formed in it. As they watched, the girl appeared to stop shivering when the runes touched her body, as if she were immobilized. The blood appeared to be soaked into the runes and then flowed into the girl. Naruto and the other two could already see the changes occurring to her as it happened. Her hair seemed to have changed a bit, the red streaks seemed to have grown and the main blonde hair replaced by the red hair. Now her hair resembled Kushina, but golden streaks laid within. It appeared that her skin, which was the same tone as Kushina's, had become somewhat paler, much like Naruto's. Her face appears to have lost some of its tomato-like appearance, but the whisker lines are still there and there is a slight decrease in baby fat. Naruto sighed as the blood completed transforming into the transformed Naruki's frozen form, then put his hand on the girl's head and continued speaking. "For the final step, she will require not only my blood but also some of my devil power to awaken her own devil blood if she is to truly survive in Makai. So when this is finished she should be just fine." The two nodded and watched with bated breath as they watched their master practically save Kushina's daughter from death and bring her to a new life they knew she would love than the one she had before. Channeling his devil power while condensing it into a much weaker version as to not kill the child due to overpower, he channeled it through his body and to his hands before he spoke. "Akuma Magiku. Akuma no Pawa Tenso. Kakusei. Demon Magic. Demonic Power Transfer. Awakening." With that, his hands burst into purple flames before they traveled to Naruki, engulfing her body. Though the flames didn't harm her, more like it was welcoming her, covering her up like a warm blanket. Plus the comfort showing on the girl's face showed exactly how much she felt comforted at the flames engulfing her body. However, they believed that the blood quickly entered her body and activated her devil blood by introducing new demonic genes. When the body quickly sent out a tiny shockwave, leaving a tiny crater where she lay, it appeared to have worked. Although Naruto raised an eyebrow at the power output she just released, neither he nor the other two Uzumaki were at all bothered by it. "That's interesting. Even though she didn't have as much power as most demons, it was still sufficient." Before entering the Yukai levels of the trained demon, it was roughly at the level of a low-mid-class demon. At this age, the majority of demon children never possess such power. The sound of a faint murmur beneath him interrupted his thoughts. Naruki's face scrunched up as he looked down, and she opened her eyes slowly before closing them and rubbing her tiny fists in her eyes to get them used to the sudden light she saw. When she opened them again, Naruto noticed, somewhat to his surprise, that her eyes had changed from being azure to more like Kushina's. Instead of being the deep violet that Kushina had, they were a combination of his own eyes and Kushina's light violet. She looked up to see the man she had nicknamed, the Scary Man, staring down at her with a face that was almost expressionless. Anyo, sir?" she said, blinking quickly. "Where am I? KK.ka.san. Where are you?" Despite her timidity, she spoke with a fiery tone. Before he spoke, Naruto simply continued to look at her while he heard her question. As Kushina and Mito's eyes widened in understanding of what he meant, Naruki blinked in confusion. It seems I've missed something. Oh, that's right. I need to pull that pest out of you to fully reach your demonic abilities. Do not worry, the girl shall not be harmed in any shape or form. Though, I can't say the same for the kitsune within her," he said, not turning to face them, as he always does when he senses their distress. Naruto put a hand on her shoulder and spoke, nodding that she would be all right. "Child, you'll be in more pain than you can possibly imagine if you speak. Instead, move." Despite her youth, the girl nodded at him, understanding what he meant by the gravity in his voice. Her eyes were blazing with curiosity. When he saw this, he nodded and then put his other hand on her navel, which glowed a vivid purple before he spoke. "Akuma no Magiku. Akuma no Chushutsu. Demon Magic. Demonic Extraction." His hand quickly flared purple flames once more, but this time it took the form of a claw. Then, without warning, he stabbed Naruki in the stomach and into the seal. However, Naruki managed to suppress a little cry of agony. With a tiny flick of his wrist, Naruto pulled out his hand and threw his arm outward, sending a red blur away from himself and Naruki. His eyes were closed in a small concentration as his spiritually blazed hand searched the depth of Megami's divine Fuinjutsu before he snapped them open and said, "There you are." As he did so, a red, crimson flash burst from Naruki's form, blinding Kushina and Mito. Naruto simply stared at her form, his eyebrows raised slightly in response to the scene unfolding in front of him. Naruki's body hadn't changed, but the new appendages did make him guess. For the time being, two crimson fluffy fox ears twitched above her head while a red crimson foxtail waved past her ass. Although not that much, her whisker lines appeared to have slightly deepened. Seeing she was fine, he waved his arm and the runic circle soon cracked before breaking away like glass before dissolving into the air in a black smoke. "Okay, she should be fine," he said before his gaze shifted toward another occupant inside the cavern. At what he saw, his purple eyes glowed with rage. Kushina and Mito wasted no time and appeared beside the confused Naruki, and before the girl knew it, she was pulled into an almost crushing hug by Kushina. She blinked rapidly as she was practically smothered by Kushina. Mito didn't help matters as she too was hugging them both in a great embrace. Seeing struggling feudal, she snuggled in her mother's arms, letting a small purr as her ears twitched, as did her new tail. The two saw this and gave Naruto a questioning gaze, to which he grunted, "I'd say it's a side effect of being the Kyuubi's container. Unlike you two, Naruki became a devil differently, and just having the Kyuubi's Yukai still in her even after the extraction, it fused with her genes, making her into a hybrid of a devil and a kitsune," he said with a nonchalant tone. Kushina accepted it without question before she nuzzled her face into her Masumi's hair. As the three Uzumakis stayed together, Naruto's gaze were now dead set upon the figure before him. "Now, what to do with you?" When he spoke, Kushina, Mito, and the slightly awake Naruki would all look at him. They were shocked to discover that Akemi was the person he was speaking to. Her long crimson blood-red hair was splattered across her back and the ground as her figure was kneeling on the ground. Her milky skin appeared paler than usual, and her crimson, slitted eyes betrayed unimaginable fatigue. Her kimono scuffled a bit from the sudden extraction, but when her eyes soon landed upon Naruto's own purple ones, they soon swelled up in immense fear. Naruto shifting his body to her, he walked up to her with an impassive look on his face. Sensing something wrong, Naruki struggled out of Kushina's arms and ran toward Naruto. As the devil got to Akemi, he suddenly felt a sudden pull on his leg. Slowly looking down, he saw the worried face of the newly transformed Naruki. "Wait, sir, please don't hurt her, she's my friend. She was my only friend I had and I don't want to lose her. Please let her stay with us." Naruto just kept his impassive stare on the girl before he cast his gaze to Kushina, giving her a pointed gaze. Seeing this, she quickly went to him and kneeled to her daughter and slowly but gently wrapped her arms around her body and pulled her from her master's leg. Even as she clinged as best she could, Kushina wouldn't have it and pulled her daughter away. "No. Ka-san. Please let me go. I don't want her to get hurt because she's my fiancé." In her mother's arms, Naruki yelled and thrashed. Before she could stop her daughter's thrashing, Kushina hurried to Mito, dropped to her knees, and gave her a full embrace, allowing her chest to silence her little muffled yells. She looked down at her daughter and smiled tearfully as she began to relax. "Can you be a grown-up and listen to Ka-san for a minute, Naruki-chan?" The girl's eyes swelled up with inevitable tears, becoming red and puffy as she slowly glanced at her mother while stopping her from thrashing completely. "You see, Akemi-chan has done a lot of bad things which have made Naruto-sama very displeased with her," she said, planting a tiny kiss on her forehead. "Trust me, I understand your feelings for Akemi-chan, who was also a friend of mine." When the little hybrid heard this, she looked at her crying Ka-san, her eyes widening before she blinked to try to wipe the tears away. "Is she was?" she asked. Kushina simply grinned and nodded. She said, "Yes, she was. In fact, Akemi-chan was my friend just like she was to you," while focusing on her daughter's eyes. "She was always there for me when no one else was during my childhood. There have been moments in my life when I wouldn't be here now if it weren't for her. Heck, she was overjoyed to learn that I had you and wanted to see you all the time after that." Naruki was so taken aback by Kushina's words that she couldn't help but smile broadly. That was before the circumstances resurfaced, but Kushina noticed and went on, "But that's a story for another time. You see, Naruki-chan, there are only certain things that Akemi-chan has done that need to be atoned for in any way possible. We are powerless to stop Naruto. Sama from dealing with her in his own way. But she's my friend, Kushina said softly, nodding and encircling her daughter even more. I know Naruki-chan. I know, but like I said, there is nothing we can do. Naruki became silent and turned to face her friend and her savior with concern. With his body looming like a furious titan, Naruto stood in front of Akemi, his eyes staring down hers without the slightest hesitation, his weight pressing down on her like a monstrous weight. She looked in terror as she saw Naruto's left hand crackling with pure black, purple, streaked lightning, which was before the area was filled with the sound of lightning. She could sense the lightning's immense power, which was far greater than she could comprehend. To be honest, she thought the power was powerful enough to destroy the Jubi itself. She didn't doubt it, depending on who was attacking. With his lightning encased hand inches from Akemi's head, Naruto approached her and spoke, giving her a stern look. Now, Biju, give me a compelling argument for not destroying you at your current position. Because you have allowed yourself, to drag our kind's name through the fucking mud and inflict mockery on it. The most powerful of the Biju. And not just once, but 3 times, under human control. His demonic, sinister tone frightened Akemi, who was already shaking. The Kitsune Biju couldn't take her eyes off the man's, and she couldn't help but feel more terrified than she had ever felt before. Who could blame her, after all? A legend and a nightmare of the demon kind stood in front of her, ready to annihilate her. All demons and even titans feared this most powerful of the demon titans. According to legend, the devil created and brought about the end of the world numerous times through his battles with Lucifer. Nobody wanted him as an enemy since his name caused the deities to tremble with rage. And right now, that very devil was before her, ready to completely destroy her and her soul and send them both to the oblivion. Because it went against her demonic pride, she rarely or never bowed her head in total submission. However, she didn't give a damn about her pride when it came to someone who could kill you with just a flick of his hand. Akemi said, I know. And I know there's nothing that can ever change for the things I've done and let pass, in the most respectful tone she has ever used. She spoke with the utmost honesty and truth when she said, I knew I should have been more careful around humans, especially when I knew they could enslave others, but I never expected to be caught like that. As the lightning's power increased and a dark aura began to envelop his body, Naruto narrowed his eyes. She literally slammed her head to the ground in a bow before the devil, who literally held her life in his hands, as her eyes widened even more at the sight of this. She spoke with such honesty and pleading that it saddened Uzumaki and shocked the 3. Naruto raised an eyebrow in mild curiosity when he said, but I really want to make amends for all the mistakes I've made, even if it would take me countless years. I want nothing more than to make amends for my past failures. I swear it to you on my demon honor and every 9 of my Kitsune tails. The Kitsune were known to never break promises, no matter how big or small, and by swearing on her tails, she was announcing the extent of her sacrifices to atone for her transgressions. Swearing on her tails in addition to her demon honor? This development is intriguing. And what, pray tell, do you have that I could honestly want, and it best be good lest your soul be obliterated right now? He said, looking into her eyes. To support his statement, he held the lightning encased hand close to her face. Its purpose was to increase the Kitsune's trembling and fear. She said, I'm willing to become your slave for eternity, with honesty and desperation in her voice. Naruto narrowed his eyes on the words she just uttered. To speak such things, a weakling? Become his slave? With a slave as weak as she was, he would have nothing to do with that insult. She was a disgrace to the entire demon race because, if a pitiful human with a weak little bloodline could control her, a demon could do the same with a single swift motion. I know I'm weak right now, but I want nothing more than to regain my worth, and if you would be willing to help me regain my true powers, then I would be ever so much more useful to you, Akemi said, sounding as though she could hear his thoughts. Her tone was laced with fear and desperation, and she even started to cry, which was shocking. When she mentioned true powers, Naruto arched an eyebrow because he understood what she was talking about. She was referring to becoming the new Jubi by consuming her siblings' remaining 8 Biju when she said she would become the Jubi. Then again, the first Jubi was just a power-hungry fool that couldn't control his own power and became a slave to that pathetic sage. He thought before he looked down at the trembling form of Akemi before he spoke, that would be interesting. If you were to devour your siblings and become the new Jubi, you would most certainly become much stronger than you are now. Akemi gained a small flicker of hope that started to build in her stomach, only for it to be squashed down when he spoke again. But you should know, the previous Jubi couldn't hold a candle to Lucifer, his elites or generals, but also Yami's guardians. And they're 10 times stronger now than they were then. He said, as the quality is pretty low these days, the best you could do if you were to become a Jubi is to defeat some of Lucifer's rebel field commanders if you can control that power. He waited for her response, and if he didn't like it, then there would be one less Biju alive. Akemi nervously swallowed the lump in her throat as she bit her lip, frantically thinking of what she could do before an idea popped into her mind. What if I ate their hearts? Her answer all but a shaky one that would seem so unseemly to be said from her, the Kyuubi no Kitsune. This caught his attention, and as he looked down at her, the lightning's power seemed to diminish along with his ebony aura, allowing her to breathe a little more easily. Whose heart are you referring to? His tone was one of curiosity and interest. Akemi looked a bit hopeful now, hoping she was getting a second chance. The generals, the elites of Lucifer and Yami's guardians and chosen ones. Her answer made him quirk an eyebrow at her words. Before he stared deep into her eyes into breaking contact for a good few minutes. Unlike him, Akemi was having a very hard time keeping contact with his eyes, for the overwhelming power he excluded made her so very weak in the knees and her demonic instincts just screaming at her that this was the ultimate alpha. Before he said, as you are now, their Yukai would rip you to shreds in just a few seconds, he looked at her. If you were to become the Jubi, you would be far more powerful than the previous one. This is because, as we both know, the first Jubi was weak and unable to control his power because of his intense bloodlust, which quickly consumed him and reduced him to a mindless beast before he managed to enter Ningenkai and, you know the rest, became a slave to that sage and divided its power. Tell me, can you, in contrast to the first Jubi, manage the Jubi's power and grow stronger over time, or will you turn into a mindless beast like the first Jubi? His words cutting deep into Akemi's soul. The Kitsune lowered her head and thought for a brief moment before snapping her face up to him. Her crimson-slitted eyes, which had previously been filled with anxiety and fear, were now simply brimming with resolve. Her eyes were fixed firmly on his. For you, your lordship, I will and shall endure even worse than that, and in your name I will become stronger and not let the power consume me and bind me like my predecessor. She said, that I swear completely and utterly. Her words rang true. Naruto looked down at her and saw that she was telling the whole truth. The lightning around his hand was then cancelled when he flicked his hand away with a tiny wrist twitch. As his aura faded, Akemi was able to breathe more easily. Out of all the Uzumakis who watched, the young girl Naruki appeared the most optimistic about what he would do. Very well then, prove to me how much you're willing to go. Prove to me you want to get stronger. And if you should impress me, then you will be spared and become my slave, he said, turning slightly and casting her an expectant glance over his shoulder before turning back to face the Uzumaki women. Mito in the field, show me what exactly she's capable of and do not hold back, he said in a commanding tone that made the three freeze as he approached them, ignoring the grateful look Akemi was giving him. He wanted her to know that even if the Biju is a friend, she should not hold anything back. Before approaching Akemi, Mito bowed slightly, her expression impassive, as if she were mentally thanking her master for giving Akemi a chance. He turned around and watched the impending fight as he approached Kushina and Naruki. However, he glanced down for a moment when he sensed two pairs of eyes on him, seeing Kushina's grateful violet eyes and Naruki's joyful, giddy ones. When her master was right next to her, Kushina got to her feet quickly, but that didn't mean she let go of Naruki. Kushina occasionally glanced at her master before turning back to the front as the three watched Mito and Akemi get ready. Even though he was on the verge of killing Akemi, she couldn't help but feel even happier as his slave. With a silent sigh, she moved closer to him gradually before forcing Naruto to stiffen by resting her head on his shoulder, thus making him widen his eyes slightly while Naruki watched the action curiously. Looking down at the redhead leaning on his shoulder, Naruto narrowed his eyes as that jolt came back and in full force as well. To be honest, he had no idea what it was, and it was beginning to annoy him. However, he genuinely felt obliged to keep Kushina from pushing him away and to threaten to kill her if she did so again. He seemed to be being pushed down by something, telling him to just let her do what she was doing. Taking a deep breath, he kept watching the inevitable battle. The broad grin on Kushina's face and the blush that could turn a tomato deathly pale were invisible to him. To her great surprise, he didn't push her away as she had assumed he would when she did this. He allowed her to rely on him. It was even better for her because of the way he moved slightly so her head could rest comfortably between his shoulder and chest. She let out another sigh, this time sensing the warmth emanating from her master, which covered her body like a cozy blanket that would keep Naruki and herself warm. She glanced at her daughter for a moment and noticed her slight surprise that she was sleeping at the moment, then quietly cuddling closer to her. She muttered, "Naruto Sama, thank you for giving her this chance," to which he simply grunted. "It still depends on Kushina. If she can't convince me that she can defeat Mito, she won't have this opportunity." It all comes down to whether or not she is prepared to go above and beyond to strengthen herself and atone for her past transgressions. She simply nodded, understanding that it was a firm statement. If not, she will die no matter what. To them, his word was law, and no matter how much you wanted it to be otherwise, you knew it couldn't be broken. So Kushina just closed her eyes for a moment, enjoying herself from feeling herself leaning against her master. She then opened her eyes to watch the battle that was about to begin. Oh, very well, master. With Akemi and Mito. As they stood on opposite ends, Mito and Akemi eyed each other, prepared to engage in combat. Mito eyeing her former prisoner with an impassive look as our demonic aura started to leak off her and shroud her body in a crimson-purple aura. As Akemi gave her a stare filled with determination and the will to win something that made her mentally smile at. When Akemi unleashed her demonic power, her appendages emerged, including 9 flowing foxtails and 2 long, crimson fox ears that protruded from her rear end. Her hands quickly turned into claws as her mouth opened to reveal fangs, and the whiskers on her face grew deeper until they seemed real. When Mito noticed that Akemi was prepared, she said, "Now, Akemi, let's see how willing you are to go. To impress master." Mito then withdrew her hands before rushing in Akemi's direction, and the Biju followed suit. Her purple eyes glowing as Akemi's own crimson doing the same. Once they appeared inches from each other, it signaled the fight had begun. Boom! As Mito and Akemi struggled with a headlock grip, a burst of smoke and dust erupted. Their grip on the others grew tighter and tighter. Each of them held their ground, standing firmly on the crumbling ground. Akemi struggled to maintain her stance as Mito's overwhelming strength rapidly pushed hers down, but Mito remained as unflappable as ever. She reacted swiftly, swatting Mito away and into the cavern walls with one of her tails coming from her left, behind her guard. She continued to run straight at the always silent Mito, but she stopped when she felt a sharp blow to her stomach. Glancing down, she saw that Mito's foot had slammed into her stomach, sending her flying into the wall across from her, thus cracking it as rubble started to fall around her. She was still trying to wave off the hit she felt that knocked the air right out of her, only to see a pair of glowing purple eyes converge right on her. Before her hand grabbed Akemi's face and she swung right past her master and Kushina, causing the wind to blow past them and blow their hair back as she sped past them after her target. Mito's only warning was, "Don't let up or you will lose." Akemi. Amazingly, Naruki remained asleep the entire time. While Naruto simply turned around and moved in the direction of the battleground, Kushina blinked slowly. Kushina was right next to him, holding her child in her arms right away. As she looked at her master, she said, "Looks like this is going to get a little rowdy, don't you think so, Naruto?" "Sama? I can't rely on him again," she said, pouting to herself. She was enjoying that, damn it.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.